Yes, we do have a quorum.
Yep.
He didn't mention to me.
He did not mention that to me either.
You want me to text him?
No, don't worry about it for the moment. Okay, just getting it started. All right. Okay, good evening. I will call to order this meeting of the school committee at 6:09 PM on November 19th, 2024. And our agenda this evening is as follows. We will have public comment to begin with, followed by the superintendent, chair, and student remarks on elementary literacy team update, an enrollment update, and an update on the MASC-MASS conference. Then that will be followed by the consent agenda, which we have a consideration of acceptance of $470 gift from the Winchester Elks to the Winchester High School, a $5,000 grant from MCIEA for the English department, approval of a $500 grant from the ENCA Society for the monthly costs of supplies for the Creative Technology Center events, acceptance of a Chinese calligraphy mural, consideration of approval of the Winchester High School chorus members to sing at a Providence Bruins game in Providence on December 15th. Then we will have report, update, and action items, including consideration of appointment of Dr. Hackett as the Winchester Public Schools representative to the SEAM Collaborative Board of Directors, consideration of a developer request for a curb cut on Bates Road, Finance Subcommittee update on the FY26 budget development, and then a Policy Subcommittee policy update. These will be first readings on this long list. Policy ILD, student submission to educational research. Actually, maybe I'll just list them. Policy JJ, JJA, JKA, KCD, CHA-E, GA, IHAI, JJG, JA, JICFB, and a required biannual review of the bullying prevention and response plan. Then we'll have anticipated future agenda items, future meeting dates, and an executive session, followed by adjournment. So with that, we will start with public comment, and I believe we have one member of the public here. I'll just read the little preamble, which I know you're very familiar with, but we shall do it anyway. Any citizen wishing to, can we have this? I'm up really loud. Okay. Don't have my glasses today. Any citizen wishing to speak before the committee shall identify themselves by name and address and shall speak for no longer than 3 minutes. All remarks will be addressed through the chair of the meeting, and public comment is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between citizens and the committee. It's a citizen's opportunity to express their opinion on issues of school committee business. Written comments longer than 3 minutes may be presented to the committee at the address below, schoolcommittee@winchesterps.org.
Thank you very much. Michael Betancourt, 5 Amberwood Drive, Precinct 6. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for your service on the school committee. You do a fantastic job, and I know how many hours that you put in, and I appreciate the opportunity to come here and speak. The topic I wanted to speak of tonight was on the Bates and Irving Road project that is on your agenda. And I wanted to encourage you to find a way to work with a developer to make that project happen. Inclusiveness is a value that is part of our school system, part of our town's human rights statement, and a value that we share and we hold dearly here. And I think sometimes we wring our hands a little bit and we are uncomfortable with projects that are coming in, and I hope that a slight curb cut request is not going to be the thing that stops a project from coming in, which would give families access to our school system. The 40B law that we talk about a lot, which is a way to work within our zoning to build affordable housing. The title of that was actually the Anti-Snob Zoning Law of 1969, right? And so it was made to prevent communities from using zoning and to keep affordable housing out of their communities. And I don't know that this is a 40B project or not, but I think the sentiment is there, is that we shouldn't look for reasons to excuse or reject affordable housing, but actually look for reasons to do it. This seems like a sensible project for our community, and I think putting it aside seems more prevarication than policy at this point. And I encourage the school committee to work with the developer, and if there's anything certainly the select board can do or the community can do to support a right project for that area, especially near one of the top schools in our district, I would appreciate that and extend my hand to you as well for that. And again, thank you for your time and thank you for your service.
Thank you very much. Do we have anybody else for public comment this evening? So, all right, seeing none, I will close public comment, and we will move on to the next item of business, which is the superintendent's remarks.
Well, good evening, everybody. Good to see you. It has been busy. It's hard to believe that next week is Thanksgiving week. We have been busy with work around the elementary literacy team and the work that they're doing right now, and they met again today, has really kind of focused on the structural components, the goal components, what we want our literacy program to look like, so that we can build the support structures in the district so that isn't something that, so it's something that can be institutionalized and supported on a long-term basis. And I think you remember the collaborative talking about coherence and consistency, and having a process that people understand, that in a process that we can actually use potentially kind of moving forward with some of our other content areas as we look at other content areas moving forward. What I'd like to do tonight is just share with you that the ELT is going to meet again in December, I think on the 9th. The committee has a meeting on the 12th of December. I think it's a good time then to have someone other than me talk about kind of where we are. It'd be a good kind of mid-year checkpoint. I don't want to build it up as something that people should be bringing popcorn to, but because I don't want to put that kind of pressure on people. But I think to have people who are a part of the ELT, maybe even part of the, or even joined by the collaborative, come in and actually talk about the work a little bit more in depth, because that would do it more justice than I can do it, certainly in kind of a verbal summary. So that would be, that's what we're aiming to do. So I will leave it at that. We do also have a grade point average committee working at the high school. I know some of you are aware of it. Some of you have been directly involved in it. Some of you have been receiving communications on it. The group, just by way of quick summary, the group is still working. And they'll be getting some feedback on some of the recommendations, I think, within the next couple of weeks. I know they're also aiming to do a Zoom community kind of question and answer presentation, question and answer feedback sometime in December. And the school committee can expect that you'll be hearing, maybe more than once, but you'll be hearing from them in the recommendations in January, February-ish, kind of lining up along with program studies and the general flow. But you'll also be getting information ahead of time. We'll make sure that you're getting what is going for the community forum, so that if you have questions, you can ask those as well. So that is something that we've been working on, I can look forward to. I'll also mention that Dr. Alan has been working with a team of teachers and educators at the middle school, McCall, to really take a really in-depth look at the schedule. It's schedules are something that we talk about all the time, but I think it's been a while at McCall, and that there's been kind of a full-blown bottom-up look at a schedule and to determine whether or not there might be some schedule models that we might want to look at and talk about, and maybe even plan for as we go into next year. So that group has kicked off their work, and we'll provide an update, not tonight, but at a future meeting on, Dr. Ellenham, I can provide an update on that along with Mr. Lynn. Off to, I think, a great start. I think just seeing some of the survey information, the feedback from teachers, it's great to see kind of the focus being on how do we make this better for kids, and that's what we're trying to do. Schedules always have constraints. We're really committed to trying to figure out how to limit those as best we can, and hopefully we come up with a schedule that is better than what we have. Not that the one we have is horrible, but I think it's a good time for us to take a look at that as we also go into the budget season. So those are the kind of the major pieces of work that we have going on right now. And that's it for me.
Okay, great. Enrollment update?
Yes, I'm going to have Mr. Maron do that. You won't be able to see it. I did share the PowerPoint.
I sort of see it.
Yeah. All right. Good evening, everyone. So quick update on enrollment. So in front of you tonight is our final October 1 number that was submitted to the state. So the final enrollment total was 4,320. And in preparation for next year's budget, we typically go through a process called a cohort survival method, and it looks back at our prior enrollments in those cohorts and how they move through their grade levels and what that survival rate is, whether they increase or decrease. And that tends to kind of factor in any moves or other enrollment trends that we see. So on the screen here is we typically use the 3-year rate. So looking back those 3 years, you can see that rate highlighted, 3-year rate, and then that applies that to our October 1 data. So all the data listed here is October 1 from prior years. And that final line is what we're projecting for next year. So going from where we are today, about 4,320 to 4,375 next year is the current projection. And let's see. This is that on that same graph that you saw before, adding the projection. So we still have some work to do looking at the census data. We usually run that in January, seeing local birth rates. And so we're carrying a number for kindergarten that's kind of flat each year. So we can see how accurate that would be. And then we're also working on a larger picture of enrollment as part of our facilities master planning going on through UMass Donahue Institute. We're coming in soon to start that process and hopefully have some good numbers by December. So that's it for mine.
Okay, great. Any questions from the committee on that?
Can I just ask a nerdy question? When they calculate the cohort survival rate, is that using pre-pandemic rates? Is that how they do that?
Yeah, so looking back 3 years, we're sort of post-pandemic. So I
Oh,
think
okay,
the
so
numbers are more accurate.
They have enough
So
data.
before we were using pre and post and kind of
Doing
doing a
that.
hybrid.
That's
So now I feel
nice.
we're seeing good numbers now in
Okay.
that.
Great.
All right.
Andrew, I noticed the total's about 55 more kids between this year and next year. Do you think, is that correlated with the number of kids we've seen with move-ins, or is this on top of those move-ins?
There's some of that. Some of this is historical changes. And also our October 1 number is where we're at on October 1. And since then, we've added about 30 students.
Okay.
So that changes. We had just 3 move in yesterday across all grade levels, I think. So, yeah, so it factors that in, and there's some assumptions that there's either, like the 9th grade, or that jump from 8th grade to 9th grade has kind of been more stable in the past couple of years, where typically had more folks go private in high school, and
Right,
that's kind of carried over it's at like 100%, you'll see it just kind of carries.
right.
So some of those trends baked in.
I would just point out that when you look at the breakdown in the grade spans, the growth really is showing up in the middle school and the high school, which may have, depending on class sizes and sections. It could have some implications from a staffing standpoint, so we'll be looking at that, obviously, with the school administrators over the coming weeks, too, to see if we need sections for any of our current existing program before we even potentially have a conversation about what else is needed.
Can I ask just a follow-up to what you just said to Ms. Bergstrom? You said there were 30 students since October 1st of this year, so the last 6 weeks, 30 of the 55 that we project over the course of the entire year for next year. So I guess I'm inferring,
Well, this is our, current year enrollment. So with those assumptions built in, it's how we, so that's not for next year's projection, it's current year-to-date numbers.
So it's
So-
30 above the 4320.
Correct. Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I guess the question was going to be, it sounds like your confidence that the number would be at least 4375 is fairly high. If we're already at 4350, we're more than halfway there, and we're only 6 weeks into the year.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we do see that, like, looking back at previous October 1s, we do run, a greater year-to-date as folks move in and transfers. And
Do you often get a bump like right after October 1, or is it pretty consistent?
I don't know if I would call it a bump, but we do have an increase.
Yeah.
It does ebb and flow. So.
It's early. We don't generally see that kind of enrollment bump during the fall. And I say we don't, it's been my 4th year, but generally we see the movements start to happen in the spring and through the summer. So it is kind of interesting that we're seeing them now, but obviously it's a direct correlation and connection to the housing
Housing
developments that are opening. So,
Yes. So of those moving in, they are mostly around those new developments. So.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yep.
All right. If there are no further questions on that topic, we'll move to the update on the Massachusetts Association of School Committees and Association of School Superintendents conference update. And Ms. Bergstrom and I had attended. It ran November 6th through 8th, and we went to the November 6th and 7th dates. Do you want to start off?
I think in your packets, you all received a memo from Ms. Bolognese and I with the sessions that we were able to attend while we were there. I think that, not surprisingly, MASC has a lot of the same interests as an organization that we do as a committee, and it was really interesting to hear from some experts around some of those areas and to talk to our colleagues in other towns and see how they are working in some of those same issues. We also heard from Russell Johnston, who is now the acting commissioner of the Department of Education, and he shared DESE's goals, which may or may not be as closely aligned to ours. They're more high-level ideas that things like high-dose tutoring and really a lot of projects that are targeted at raising the standards for schools with a lot more socioeconomic diversity than we have here in Winchester. So but he was super interesting, super engaging, and really open to feedback from committee members and committees. He said, basically, if you have interest, to please email him about any of the goals that are now on the DESE page, which has been relaunched. So if you go on the Department of Education page, there's new applications there, and they've really updated the website nicely. So you can go check that out too. If you have any questions about any of those sessions, please get in touch with Ms. Bolognese or myself, and we're happy to share what we've learned. There was only one slide deck that was shared with us from MASC that we were able to share with you, and the initials after the names, obviously, are who attended each session, so,
Can I ask one question?
absolutely.
Sure.
So under model policies for AI, is this something, is it baked, or it was more of a reporting that they're in the process of developing policies? Where could we go to learn a little more about that? Because I would presume not every interest of MASC may be aligned with the interest of this district when it comes to that, but there's still a lot of conversation yet for us to have.
Yeah, MASCs are actually recommending that districts not engage in setting policy around it right now. They were recommending that if districts wanted to go down that path, that a better pathway would be to be looking at guidelines than policies, because they expect AI to be changing so quickly over the next few years, and the way students and teachers want to interact with it and choose to interact with it. They said that actually the best thing that they have found districts across the country doing to sort of protect themselves against any issues with AI is having a really strong and enforceable honor code.
Say that last part.
Strong and enforceable honor code
Yeah.
or something of that ilk versus having a policy around AI.
You know, and my curiosity, it's not, although like a lot of parents, I mean, I'm curious about using it inappropriately, but I'm actually more interested in kind of guidance we can give about constructive uses for teachers and for students. I mean, it's the rate at which it has already been embraced by corporate America is quite stunning, and the amount of investment that's going into it is stunning. And I'm actually more, I just don't want our Winchester High School grads, frankly, to be unprepared, you know, in college and in the workplace, because they don't have the kind of tools that they might otherwise have. So I think there's a lot of conversation for us to have at a very high altitude about being, you know, sort of open-minded about this, but also just recognize everybody's different, our teachers are different. And I do have some concern about, not that I know that this is happening, but if I have any concern, is that some of our students might have some whiplash, because, you know, teacher A has this sort of, I'll call it policy, because that's what they call it. It's more of a guideline, practice,
Right.
what have you. You know, it can really vary classroom to classroom to classroom. So to the extent we can be consistent around expectations or guidelines, I think it would be helpful.
Yeah, and I think that's why they were saying to approach it through your honor code, because your honor code can keep it high level and help apply it to the situation that you find yourselves in, because, like I said, it's changing so quickly that even if you write policy or guidelines today, by the end of the school year, they might not even be valid. So they also said, you know, be expecting anything you put down on paper around it to be reviewing frequently, and make sure you have the bandwidth to do that.
Very good. Thank you.
So,
Maher,
I
sure.
just want to add, because I was telling Gail, like, this is such an interesting, like, topic, especially, like, obviously being a student at WHS. Oh, sorry. My voice is also, like, on. Sorry. But I was telling Mikhail that a lot of my classes have interestingly switched to, like, a lot of, like, writing-based things. Like, my AP Lit class, although our AP exam is on the computer, like, we handwrite most of our essays in class. To, you know, like, protect against the use of, like, AI and things like that. And, like, I'm currently doing an assignment for psych. We have 70 handwritten questions to answer to protect against things like this. But like you said, like, different teachers do things differently. I think that, like, it would be helpful if there was more of, like, a stricter guideline of, like, you know, what are the expectations from both students from, like, an honor code perspective, and also, like, from teachers in terms of, like, how they're, like, regulating the use of, like, AI and things like that.
I would, that's a great point. And I
Yeah.
would just add that I think initially, public education, we kind of go to, how do we make sure it doesn't get abused?
right.
Versus how do we teach around it and with it, right? And how does it become part of our curriculum, and what we want to make sure our students know the capabilities of and what they can do with it. And, you know, that's going to take some time. So, I mean, I do think, in general, based on what you just said about the MESC meeting, I think everyone's still kind of in that protective mode. How do we make sure that, you know, everyone's doing their own work, and, but hopefully we, you know, and I know we are already here, but start to kind of evolve into what is the power of it for us and classroom teachers with kids, you know?
I like the wording that you used of, like, how do we teach, like, with it? Because I think, like, looking forward, like, the way that the world's going, like, there's no without. You know what I mean? So, like, I
Right.
think,
Right.
like, from that kind of standpoint, like, yeah, you talk, like, honor code and things like that, but, you know, you're talking about, like, 16, 17-year-old high schoolers trying to get into college. Like, I think it's a high expectation sometimes to think, you know, that expect that everyone's going to, unfortunately, that, you know, everyone's going to uphold that. So I like what you said about, like, just figuring out a way to, how do we maneuver and try to teach with it. I thought that was just really interesting.
And Meher, a lot of the districts were giving examples of how they're actually allowing kids to use AI because it helps support the learning that they're doing.
Right, right.
So that's where they were, the conversation evolved around, like, do you really want to have policy around this? Because you don't want to eliminate using it in
Exactly.
situations where it could actually be helpful
Right,
to
that's
students
so
as
interesting.
well. So that was really interesting. And some districts are actually teaching AI classes too
Oh.
at their high school level.
That's really neat.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Dr.
If I
Ellenema?
can just pile on. I
Dr.
know- Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
I wanted to
Okay.
offer that I'm hearing more and more college professors starting their classes by saying, I know you're going to use AI. I'm expecting you to use AI. So let me tell you how you can. Let me give you some examples of how it's constructed.
Right.
And I would just like to say for the record, Dr. Hackett, I am aware of some freshmen at this fine school who are using the Notebook LM podcast tool that you recently shared with the school committee to summarize class notes, because it's easier to listen to class
Yeah.
notes in a podcast than it is to read pages and pages and pages of notes.
Superintendent's
friendly
kind of,
voice.
superintendent's kind of fired up about AI.
Meher and
The
Michaela are
superintendent's kind
like,
of
what
fired up
was
about
that?
AI. I'll talk about it later.
The beast is loose.
Think.
Dr. Ellenema, you had a
Sure.
comment?
So this has been a great discussion and something we've certainly been in much more deeply over the past year. But one of the things that's pretty cool is Lisa Deeker, who we've used for a lot of PD on a lot of different pieces, is also a college professor. So tying into that piece, we brought her in as one of the grad courses this summer, and she did PD around that with the teachers. And it's funny because we just finished the courses, so we've been reading the journals, the teacher reflections of the pieces, and so many people have said, like, she had such great, so we're looking to bring her back again, specifics around how to use it effectively and how to really work with it in the class instead of kind of against it or trying to protect against it. And in that, teachers were saying as they've been trying things and in that kind of positive of using it the right way, what happens is, like everything else, there's less room for using it in the wrong way when you're using it so
In the
much in the
right
right way. So coming at it kind of from that mindset, but it's just been so interesting to hear how the teachers are trying things, and a lot of people are just saying in their journal, I came from the mindset originally of how do I protect against,
Right.
and now I understand, like, how do I use it for, and then sharing those different ideas. So super excited about some of the movement around it being used productively.
But I'll see if I can get the slide deck for you too, for that one.
Thank you.
We're going to negotiate all of our union contracts straight AI. It's going to be holograms and AI. Be better than dealing with us, right?
Little robots. So,
Like the avatars at the ABBA show in London. School
right.
committee avatars.
all our avatars
Right,
animated.
right.
Holograms. Yeah, for the conference, I just thought it was a great chance to meet with colleagues from different committees, from regional school committees, from municipal school committees like us, also some of the division chairs of MASC. You can see a few of them in our little picture up there. So it's exciting to meet them and to hear about how different districts are tackling some of the same topics that we've been grappling with as well. There was also a speaker, Tim Shriver, who was very inspiring. He runs a nonprofit, and he spoke about the Dignity Index, and that every human being is driven by a need to be respected. He talked about respect versus contempt, and that I'm paraphrasing, that respect gets you somewhere, but contempt gets us nowhere. And it's really important what's really important is how we treat each other. So I thought that was a little bit of food for thought coming out of the conference.
He also, it was, one of the takeaways from that one, I think, that could apply here to us at school committee and in town government, was he also talked about a scale of building skills for dignified disagreement. And it was nice for Ms. Bolognese and I, because a lot of it fell back into the norms that we have talked about here as a committee in some of our sessions. And, you know, he talked about being curious, not furious, regulate yourself before you debate. So regulate, not debate, listen to hear and not to respond. Challenge ideas, not people, which I think we've talked about that a lot. and acknowledge knowledge. So even if you don't agree with someone, you can acknowledge that they have knowledge about a particular topic, and building up rather than tearing down. And he had an 8-point scale too about, and gave scenarios.
He gave little statements that he just
Around
flashed up on the
classrooms and
board.
kids.
Yeah,
That was
Yeah.
super interesting, so.
and you had to rank where they might be on that scale of respect versus not, versus disrespectful, dignified versus not.
Yeah.
So, yes.
I'm so sorry to backtrack on our agenda. Michaela and I had some student remarks that.
Oh, yeah, I was going to move to that one next.
Sorry, well, you go ahead and we'll get to that one.
Oh, no,
We missed you.
no. So, no, go right ahead.
Do you
If
wanna
if
start?
we're,
Oh, sure. I really like the AI conversation. I know a lot of my teachers have set like boundaries and rules. Like you can use AI to like quiz yourself, but be careful. Like there's some like misinformation there too. So you can't always like trust it, but it is getting smarter. But you can't have it like do the work for you, of course. So yeah, I think that's a really good conversation to have with students. I also have 2 more things. I think one of them was about the new gym remodeling. We're so excited that we have the funding for that. That is amazing. I know some students were hoping for badminton lines on the new gym floor. Is that? has that been-
yes, I just had a I had forwarded your email to
Oh.
Mr. Merritt, and you had a comment about it.
No, we're placing markings. So we're placing
Pass that.
markings on it, so there are a lot of lines and kind of competing priorities, so there'll be markings so we can tape off badminton if needed.
Oh,
So
okay.
there won't be
thank you.
permanent lines, but
Oh, perfect.
Yep.
I'm sure they'll be happy.
Yep.
Thank you so much. And then there's one more thing that we want to, or that I wanted to bring up for the doors closing. So I know the doors close early, like 5:30, and students sometimes can't get into the high school. And I think some of the students, we have like badges to get into the school when we go out for lunch, or at least the juniors and seniors do. We were wondering if we can like badge in during those like off hours, like later in school, like 5 to 9, or like or whenever the clubs are, because a lot of us are kind of like banging on the door, stuck out
I
there.
am too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So we were wondering if it might be a possibility. I know I have my badge here, but I don't know if it like can act as the teachers. But yeah, that was one thing that we had. But do you want to go ahead?
Can I ask a question? So
Yeah.
there are, you make an interesting point. You know, there are some clubs, I guess, that start right after school, but there are quite a few that start at like 5:30,
Yeah.
actually, in the evening. And we have athletes maybe coming back from contests or practices. Do you know, are athletes expected to just be bringing everything with them on the bus, or do we have athletes that just leave stuff in the building and they think, I'll grab it when I get back? That's the norm, isn't it?
Sometimes it's like a little bit of both. I
Okay.
usually leave like your stuff sometimes in like the locker room. We can like go in after school, after hours.
Yeah.
I remember doing that last year for tennis. I'd like always like come back for like my bags or like more stuff because it's so heavy bringing everything. I think yeah, like students kind of feel like stuck outside. I know it's definitely like for safety and we are totally aware of that, but I think we definitely if there's like some way we can like badge in or find like a little solution to it.
Do you want to speak to it, Mr. Mayor?
Oh yeah. Sorry, I keep like moving it back.
so it's technically possible. I can review it with Mr. Mahoney.
Thank you.
So it was a recommendation for the start of the school year, but we had some back and forth and just kind of kept it status quo, but we can look into it and see
Thank you.
what he says. All right.
Do anything. Thank you so much. Me too.
Mine was just quick. So I and another senior at WHS, we're part of the Mystic Valley Public Health Coalition's youth leadership team. And we'd been invited to a press conference on Monday at the State House, just to kind of represent WHS's opinion on the recent nicotine-free generation policy that passed in June. I don't know if I can explain, but yeah, mostly aware. So I'll explain. It's basically a policy that it passed first in Brookline. It's now passed in over 7 towns: Brookline, Wakefield, Stoneham, Melrose, Reading, Winchester. It's basically a policy that effectively bans access to nicotine for the next generation. So it basically says that if you're born after January of 2000, that you can never purchase nicotine in that community. So Winchester passed that in June. And so this press conference on Mondays with Mr. Jason Lewis, and it'll just be kind of a chance for us to talk about how, like, we've seen substance use issues in our community and how we've kind of seen firsthand, like, that affect, like, students at WHS, and just a chance for us to advocate for, like, the health of our youth. So more on that later, but hopefully it'll be a good experience. That's all I had, I think. That's all from us.
Thanks for representing
great.
Yeah,
Winchester.
absolutely.
Thank you. That's awesome to hear about that. So I know you've been working on that and talking
Oh
with
my gosh, you have no
for such a
idea.
long time. So we
It's
appreciate
been
the
quite the
dedication.
process.
Wow. Well, other than that,
So,
yes,
Ms.
go
Bolognese,
ahead.
so just to clarify, so the policy goes into place, the nicotine-free generation policy goes into place in Winchester on the 1st of January 2025. And we actually modified our date, so Brookline, I believe, used that earlier date. So our date is actually anyone who's born on or after the 1st of January 2004.
Okay, all of them are a little different. I know Brookline's different. Stonham's, I think, like 2001.
Yeah, so
They're-
everyone sort of, but in our
everyone-
case, just to be
yeah.
super clear, goes into effect, the Board of Health passed it unanimously, it goes into effect 1/1/25 for anyone who's born on or after 1/1/2004.
Sorry, I should have clarified that. Thank you,
So-
Mr. Matthews.
Thank you. Thanks for being able to participate in that as well.
Of course.
Sorry, I happen to be married to a certain chair of the Board of Health, so.
Clarification.
Please thank her
you.
for all her help. We couldn't have done it without, everyone's piece.
I also just wanted to say congratulations to our music students in high school for their Autumn Winds and Strings concert at the beginning of the month. Also to many, many student athletes who've been focused a lot on fall playoffs and state championships. I can think of a number of sports, volleyball, field hockey, soccer, golf, football, cross-country, swimming, just to name a few, but by no means comprehensive. So a big congratulations to all of them. Also, just sending some thoughts of support to our seniors. I know it's been a busy month putting in applications, so that's a lot of stress. So, and hopefully a big sigh of relief just to get it in, get that first round in. I'd also like to recognize the students from the volleyball team and from the Climate Action Advisory Committee who spoke up so eloquently at town meeting. We appreciate all of your hard work, and we want all of you, all of these students across the high school to know that all of you make us really proud to be a part of the Winchester community. So thank you and congratulations. So let's see. Next, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Let me just back up. So let's see. I might be reiterating this, but we have consideration of acceptance of a number of items, a $470 gift from the Winchester Elks to the Winchester High School, consideration of approval of a $5,000 grant from MCIEA for the English department, consideration of approval of a $500 grant from the ENCA Society for supplies for Creative Technology Center events, also consideration of acceptance of a live calligraphy Chinese mural, consideration of approval of the Winchester High School chorus members to sing at the Providence Bruins game in Providence, Rhode Island on December 15th.
I have one question.
Yes.
It just wasn't, I'm not sure we got all the information on item D. It mentioned there were photographs attached. I don't think that was in our packet.
Yes, I was.
And I'm not, it's just
about
not
that.
clear to me what we're accepting.
Did we put that into the slides for this
There's an
evening?
email, but I just don't know. Oh.
Uh,
The
there's
slides
Okay.
on
pictures
slide
here now.
4.
Yes.
Yeah, the calligraphy, so the.
I shared the deck. You've got it here.
Oh, that's,
Blank,
okay,
yeah.
separately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had attended this, it was in mid-October at the last farmer's market date. It was the International Day. And this is a calligrapher, Chuanzhou Zhao, Jack, who has students at the Morocco School. And he is an artist in the community who's known for doing live art calligraphy. So he produced this work. It's fairly large. I would say it fits this area inside of our desks, probably like a 10 by 12 mural. I have it folded in my guest room, and I meant to bring it tonight. So, but I rushed in and rushed out.
My next question was, where does it go? But
So,
Yeah.
and he asked for it to come to the high school. He had asked for it to come here. It says, it reads that all the children want peace, not nuclear war. And then it has his signature off to the bottom left. So, and then there's like a little mural or a little ink wash in the background. He's done calligraphy works for Versace, for Tiffany's at Copley Plaza, and then also the Peabody Essex Museum, as well as other places. So, and he has quite a number of works of art that you can see on the website that's in the information. So,
And you'll figure out, Dr.
Yes,
Hackett,
I'll
where
work
this
with the high
will
school
be displayed?
administration to figure out where this will be displayed.
Okay. Happy to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second?
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So the vote the vote is unanimous. And just a recognition with gratitude of the many generous donations from this evening that were going towards towards MCIEA funding of student portfolios, the Enka Society, and also the Winchester Elks. And also good luck to the students who are traveling to Providence to sing at the Bruins game. I had a student who did that a few years ago. It was definitely a fun and exciting night. Okay, so next up is, let's see, report and update and action items. So first off, we'll be considering appointment of Dr. Hackett as the Winchester Public Schools representative to the SEAM Collaborative Board of Directors.
So before anyone thinks this is going in my head, this happens every year. The collaborative board SEAM, where we are a member of, the district has a seat on the board of directors. All of the member districts appoint their superintendents to be part of that. We meet on a monthly basis. But by the bylaws of the collaborative, that appointment needs to be made on a yearly basis. So we're a little delayed in doing this. We'll make sure it's on the calendar for the spring, for next year, for the following year. So I would humbly accept your nomination if you would like to
So
do that.
moved.
You just clarify this is not a $100,000 appointment.
There's really, there's not a lot of
It's all
benefits
for the
that come with
glory.
it. It's, yeah, mostly for the glory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I move to appoint Dr. Hackett as the Winchester Public Schools representative to the SEAM Collaborative Board of Directors.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The vote is unanimous. Thank you, Dr. Hackett.
Thank you.
Dr. Hackett, in advance.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Something else on your
Enjoy.
plate.
Enjoy having another meeting.
Thank you.
That's right. Next, we'll move on to consideration of a developer request for a curb cut on Bates Road. And just by way of background, we had first heard about this at a July meeting when the developers came and spoke to us about this project at 11 and 13 Bates Road. They were asking for a curb cut onto Bates Road. The property opens onto Irving Street, but there was a request for a curb cut onto Bates Road and an easement as it crosses, as their property crosses, as a curb cut would cross into school property. So we had asked for, the school committee had asked for some further information on this, and had also just expressed some uncertainty about what would be happening with the development or the development of the Morocco, or of plans for a new Morocco school down the road, and a desire to retain as much flexibility as possible
Down the road figuratively.
down the road in the future.
Ironically.
Yes. Oh, goodness. So if members had some had some comments about this, then I'm just opening it up.
Mr. Marin, did you have slides or anything from the developer? Thank you, to present.
Sorry.
So the developer provided this mock-up. So this is looking down Bates Road and where the curb cut would be. And I think if I scroll back here. So they're proposing ultimately to have two structures, one on the Irving side and one on Bates. Both kind of disconnected, not a single point of entry on it, with separate entrances on each side. I think they also provided, let's see this here. They got to show you this. They provided the survey, which kind of confirms that the school committee is responsible for that curb cut. So, they
So
would have
in other words,
oversight.
that curb cut's not onto a public way. That's onto school property.
Correct,
That's
yep.
why they're even talking to us. So
Yep.
the blue house on the left, that curb cut is onto a public way. Bates Road sort of dead ends,
Kind of right there. Yeah.
even though it continues, but it's just not a public way. Night.
Thank
Gail.
you.
Good night, thank you. So, Mr. Marin, just to clarify, in the document that I am looking at that's entitled School Plan, just to be super clear, so Stone Avenue West is Bates Road, even though I'm assuming that change was made sometime between April 26, 1916 and now. Just to be
Yeah.
super clear.
We don't have an exact date.
Right.
Correct.
As is Stone Ave. Yes? Oh, no, that's the other side of Washington.
Yeah, so Stone Avenue is still there.
Right.
It's just that they renamed Stone Avenue West and Lebanon Street West.
So this is the first time we've seen a rendering.
Correct.
And can you describe, what are we looking at? Those are four separate units, all with four garages?
Correct. Attached units.
And they are single occupancy units?
It's 8 units or 4 units? It looks like
8 in total.
units.
I'm sorry, I'm just focused on the
I-
Bates Road side.
I can just
Yeah.
add, they put sort of a caveat that the focus on the curb cut in this project has not gone through any town approvals, or this is really
Right.
their,
Right.
their dream, but
Right.
nothing's been approved or really
'Cause they're-
submitted.
right.
On the Irving Street side, they can build by right, theoretically.
Yep, that's existing structure there.
Yeah,
An existing structure they would take down if they were doing that, but,
Yep.
yeah.
right. With the intention of at least one affordable unit on the Bates Road side, but is what they had shared with us when they were here before.
Although they could put an affordable unit facing Irving too, but that's not what this plan is.
Right, and that's not what they are requesting of us, so,
Can I ask Mr. Marin to scroll, is it the first image that's taken from Bates Road? So can you zoom in a little bit more? So I just want to make an observation. If you were to come in off of Bates Road at that proposed curb cut, and you go in just 5 or 6 feet, so imagine you've parked right there, right in that area. Today, grade is almost 10 feet lower than that.
Yeah.
So this property slopes from Irving Street continuously towards Bates Road. That whole area is kind of like a valley. And you can see this if you can just zoom in one more time, Mr. Marin, just, let's look at the back. Zoom in more, and you see that field of green. Notice how that sharp edge is there? That's because if you actually built this, you'd be falling off at that point maybe around 7 feet. It's deeper as you come up Bates Road, not down. But I took a photo earlier today that I think Mr. Marin has, just to show you, two photos actually. But from the perspective today, if you zoom in, you can see sort of the trees coming out of that low area. And then I took another one, Mr. Marin, the second photo I sent you, you can see much better. There you go. So you can see the property stakes there on the right. So I hope what you all can appreciate is it's deep and it's large. It's about, I think it's a 15,000 square foot lot. I think it's about 65 feet of frontage. The average grade, sort of where the boat is parked, let me look at my notes. The average grade where the boat is parked is about 6 feet below top of curb on Irving. And it's about 9 feet below top of curb on Bates. That's because Bates is a higher road than Irving is. So a concern that I have, and I'm glad Mr. Betancourt's here tonight, is that I feel like this is although the request is for a curb cut, in my mind, it's about much more than a curb cut. Because to even put in a driveway, you'd have to significantly raise grade. I don't know that you would have to do what the renderings show, which is they've raised it literally up to the sidewalk level, so it's very flat. I mean, that would be convenient for somebody to live there, but honestly, it's not necessary. My own my house sits maybe 2.5 feet below top of curb because my driveway slopes down. But conservatively, if you raised that area behind the existing structure, if you raised it 4 feet, just 4, not 7, but if you raised it 4 feet, that would be almost 47,000 cubic feet. That's 1,700 cubic yards. That's 115 dual-axle dump trucks worth of fill just for 4 feet. So it's a massive amount of fill. And when I see that, then where my head goes is, so where does the water go? Because this is a sloped area, and I think about the neighbors. I mean, I can't help but think about, how do you build this stuff? So anybody would have to put in a pretty sizable retaining wall to hold that back. We don't see that in their rendering because we don't see it from that side. But as a practical matter, you can't build a retaining wall on the other person's property. You have to build it on your own property. So that may narrow to some degree kind of the buildable area for them. But again, it all depends upon how high they want to bring it. I don't think they need to bring it up as high as they show. But I wanted to just point out it is a massive, massive amount of fill that will absolutely affect stormwater management in the area. Trees on their property they can take down, I think, as a matter of right. But any trees along the lot line that are shared would surely die just because of the root system. But, I haven't looked closely enough to know how valuable those sort of trees are. But if a neighbor, it's valuable to them, then they're valuable. But then I just go back to my prior comments that I think we discussed in May or June, that this is a highly trafficked area along Bates Road. It's one of the key access points for the school, so pick up and drop off, a lot of foot traffic. In the winter, when the snow is cleared, snow's piled up there inevitably as they try to manage the sidewalk and the street. There have been some close calls there, but I think the neighbors that are there today at the top of the hill are pretty respectful about the whole pickup and drop-off routine. But there actually have been a couple of accidents there when I was a Morocco parent. So I just have discomfort about introducing vehicular traffic at what I think of as almost a pinch point. Like if this was a block or two away and there were multiple ways to get to Morocco, I might think about it differently. But this is literally, it's a funnel, save for the kids who maybe walk along Leonard Pond, by the culvert, or the kids who maybe wander in through the curb cut off Irving Street. I think it's fair to say, 80% of the kids walking to Morocco are coming down this sidewalk. So, for all those reasons, I have a lot of discomfiture. But given Mr. Betancourt's comments earlier, which I really appreciate, I don't have a concern about an affordable housing piece, although we had a rich discussion very recently in the same building, right, about 160 Forest Street. And there you heard, support for affordable housing, but we want to save the house, but we want to save the character. I heard very little shade thrown at the concept of affordable housing. But I just really struggle with what the realities of any kind of development here really look like. And the last thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up, I had suggested when we last met that I wouldn't be opposed to considering a wider curb cut off of Irving Street to accommodate, more cars for more vehicles. Since we passed the bylaw restricting curb cuts, there's a certain width that you're allowed. And because we are in a butter, I would presume if a property owner wanted to seek relief, and if you don't mind, I don't know, Mike, if that would be a site plan review or a special permit, but you would need some relief for a wider driveway. But as an abutter, I presume we would be welcome to say, that's something we support if it supports affordable housing. But I didn't know I was going to see something like this. So, I mean, that's a massive amount of earth, and I worry about the consequences of it.
So, Mr. Nixon, I just want to, for me, I think it's very important for us to sort of stay in our lane, because for me, a lot of that first part of what you said isn't actually, I think, directly a school committee decision to make. I think there are other boards and committees in town that will have to review that particular piece of it. But for me, I have concerns as well, but my concerns are centered on two different things. The first of them would be the precedent-setting nature of making this decision, which then would impact there are 13 other properties that touch on school committee or school land along the extent of Bates Road. So if you look at all of the lots that are on Irving, they are all full depth lots that go back to where the school committee or the school department's property line is along Bates Road. And I guess as part of that, I have a question for Mr. Marin. Do you know, are we obligated to, who maintains Bates Road, and are we obligated to keep it there permanently, or is it in our purview to make a decision to reroute Bates Road anywhere on our property, should we choose to do that in the future?
Yeah, I believe so. So it was maintained in coordination with the DPW department.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, if we went through the school building project and chose to reroute that, that would be within your purview, as far as I know.
Because, I mean, I'm not an expert at divining what the sort of depths are, but there's actually a pretty significant amount of property on the other side of Bates Road that is actually property that we own. And so I can imagine that, especially given the fact that the Morocco School may or may not be reconstructed and may or may not be reconstructed in that location, that we could choose at some point, as long as there's no reason why the town can't allow us to do that, that we might choose to reroute Bates Road. And we also might choose based on, the use of that property, whether that becomes parking or needs to become parking, or there's outbuildings or whatever it is. I think that's the first of my concerns, is that it kind of, by allowing a curb cut, it not only constrains us for, I believe, a precedent for all 13 of those abutters along the back of Bates, the back of their property on Bates Road, but also, then sort of constrains our use of the space on the other side of Bates Road that is actually school department property. And I think my other concern with this is that, well, let me hold on that, actually. I'll leave it at that for now, and if others can chime in.
So I'd just like to comment on the second thing you said, Mr. Matthews, because I don't think it constrains our property on the other side of Bates Road, because the difference between this property and that property is that the property owner in this case actually owns everything up to the road. So whether, to Mr. Nixon's point, if they choose to, they can build this as is and have it potentially empty onto Irving Street and have the exact same structure built there with no access, just no access from Bates Road. So the property that you're speaking of on the other side of Bates Road, we own essentially like the amount of space where this housing unit sits. So we own the woods and the street there.
Yep.
Whereas in this, the only thing we really own that we're giving them permission to use is that tiny little gray spot right there where the black dot is. We're just giving them access to cut out into the roadway.
That was not what I was saying, just to be clear. So what I was saying was, should we want to reroute Bates Road?
Right. But this won't help us reroute Bates Road, is what I'm saying, because we don't own any of this property.
You mean our portion of Bates Road, what we think of as Bates Road?
Correct,
Not the
right.
public way. The public way would stay.
And what I'm saying is there may no longer be an ability, if we were to choose to make Bates Road, can we actually go back to the view? If we were to make Bates Road go off to the right
Correct.
Yeah.
instead and go to the other edge of the property that the school department owns,
Right.
then that curb cut, if we were to allow a curb cut, it may no longer be onto Bates Road, is what I'm, because Bates Road isn't really, it's a private, at that place, it's my understanding, Les, that's why I asked Mr. Marin the question, like,
Right.
it's my understanding that we can put Bates Road, I mean, it's essentially a driveway, right? We can put it anywhere we want. Is that a
It's
fair
similar-
assessment?
Similar to
of-
Lynch, how we reconfigured that whole run, and we connected those two disconnected roads before.
Right.
So if we decided, for example, to say we wanted Bates Road to turn off to the right,
Correct.
and have it run along the property line, along the property line of the abutters from Tufts Road, and we wanted to put a parking lot, if we
Yep.
had the precedent of putting a curb cut there, then that constrains our ability, because they can't, should we decide to put a back of a parking zone, right?
Right.
Then they would no longer be exiting onto, because it's essentially a driveway, it's a private, and so we can put that wherever we would want.
But that would affect other property owners along that street as well.
No, I don't think
would
it
what?
would, actually. I think it,
What would it do?
It would affect other property owners along the street, too.
It wouldn't.
no.
And I'm trying to send this to Mr. Marin. The driveway that's on the other side of Bates Road, half that driveway is on school property. And they were notified of that when the new sidewalk went in.
Right.
This is a case where I don't know who did it, but, over the years, somebody had a driveway and then kind of had some extra asphalt and it got widened by 2 or 3 feet. And then a few years later, it got widened by 2 or 3 feet, and then again and
Is that-
again.
Is that
So-
number 5 Bates Road, Mr. Nixon?
What's that?
Is that number
Yeah, okay,
5
looks
Bates
like
Yeah.
Road?
Let me save this
Yeah,
real
it's a little
quick.
5 on the
Yes.
Google map.
Sure, screenshot. Yes, number 5. Yeah,
Trying to take it by adverse possession.
I'll send this real quick to Andrew.
I see exactly, I'm looking at it now, I see exactly what you're talking about.
I want to be able to sort
Broken
of
asphalt.
share this for the, share it for the record. All right, I just sent it to you, Andrew.
Just continues on.
You can pull it up.
Yeah.
And while Mr. Nixon's looking that up, something that you were saying and Mr. Nixon was saying strikes me that this was sent to us because the town sent them to us saying that the town wouldn't take it up through their boards and committees unless we allowed for a curb cut first. But it sounds like there's a lot of issues that you're bringing up with the site that would involve planning board and the zoning board and all kinds of permitting within the town before they would even come to us for a curb cut. I'm not sure why they've come to us first then.
Well, on that note, I think it's curious to me, because I believe the developer is on the agenda for the Housing Partnership Board tomorrow night. But the agenda says they're discussing a 4-unit development off Irving Street. But we're looking at 8 units in 2 buildings.
Right.
And if a concern that I have is that, and I don't know that this is the plan, but you just mentioned something a moment ago, Ms. Bergstrom, and I think you're 100% right. I think they could develop the front building on Irving Street for an A&R filing, meaning approval not required. That just means when you conform to the
Right.
zoning and the setbacks and so forth, A&R basically means I comply, here's my check, give me my permit. And that's fine. That actually makes it easy for the building department. But for the rear parcel, which would presumably have access onto Bates Road, if that's proposed as a 40B, is there an intent to circumvent, and I don't mean that in a nefarious way, but is there an intent to sort of skirt or avoid some of the town zoning regulations or site plan review requirements that would actually be necessary for something like this? And I just want to clarify, my comments about all the fill and dump trucks was only simply because if you ask, from my mind, if you ask me for a curb cut, it's because you want to use it as a driveway.
Right.
And I need to understand that that's actually what it's going to be used for. That seems like a practical thing to ask oneself. And so It didn't even occur to me when they came to us in May or June, because I know it's woody.
Right.
I know the land falls, but I never really stood there and looked at it. And then when I went back and looked at it, it occurred to me, if you built a driveway there today, you'd get stuck. Because it's almost at like it's probably more than a 45-degree angle. So, yes, it's technically a curb cut request, but in a practical matter, there's a bunch of other work that would then follow on, and there's a consequence of us sort of approving that. Regardless, by the way, of what kind of unit is there, what
Right.
style it is, 2, 3, 4 bedrooms, whatever, none of that matters. Just literally to pull a vehicle onto the property requires a huge amount of site work. Mr. Marin just pulled that up. If you can zoom in a little bit and go to the top third of the slide, that's what I was speaking of. So I think what Dr. Matthews was suggesting is, everything to
here.
the left of that line, we could rethink and repurpose, we could reroute. The public way stops at that yellow line, and it is curious how that driveway at number 5 has crept over the years.
And
But
is that
everything to the left
is that a non-conforming
No, it's ours now.
accessory structure?
Take it by eminent domain.
Yeah.
Well, really,
That's our shed now.
That's the new central office?
Central office.
Finally!
My understanding was that
Quality space.
when we put
We'll
in
build you an ADU on
the
it.
sidewalk,
that's what I was thinking.
when we did the new sidewalk on the Woburn side of Bates Road, which is kind of to the top here, that was maybe 5 years ago. Part of that exercise was they were actually putting in the granite curbs, right? If you remember, there was no curb here at all. It was just dirt. My understanding from the former DPW director is that property owner was notified in writing. So, I think we're sort of letting that go right now, but they've marked that in case we ever needed to come back and take that. It's not hurting anybody.
It appears to be, I'm just zooming in, it appears to be a lean-to to a shed.
I can make it work.
Shit,
The right lighting.
It's got
And there's-
Bring in a
plexiglass,
tiny house ADU.
plexiglass on 3 sides.
But I think what Dr. Matthews was suggesting is, if
Here, look.
one scenario might be that Bates Road could basically become a dead-end street again, which it
Right.
was prior to 1965. But who knows?
Can I ask a question? Can you pull back, Andrew, just so I thought where Dr. Matthews was going, which he made a better point than where I thought he was going. However, if you were to provide this curb cut, every one of those houses to the left could come and ask for a curb cut, right? There would be nothing stopping an owner from selling to a developer who is going to build some form of housing, or the lot owner decides that they would like to have a curb cut on a base street and makes the request.
Yep.
Is that, so I guess the question, when you said precedent, I just wonder where, if you were to approve this, where is this the last one? And why would this be the one? And why would there not be others? The rendering really struck me because when I saw, if you could pull that up, and I don't know how, I just hadn't thought about the structure in my head. That could be 8 cars, right?
It could be more.
It could be more, but each one of those units has 2 cars. Presumably, I don't know if that's a 1-car or 2-car garage. I guess it doesn't even matter, but certainly there's outside parking too. And 8 cars out of 1 lot coming onto Bates Road just feels like a lot to me. And I don't know, maybe we have this scenario now, and I know, but it does make me a little, I hadn't really thought about that part of it, I guess, or that could be a lot of vehicle.
And can I just add it? So the second point that I was going to make earlier, I guess it was really the third point, is that currently, if you go, I don't know, Mr. Marin, whether there's like a aerial view. So so at the upper, correct, there. So we actually have, starting at 3739 Irving, we have or roughly, it could also be 3133, but we have striped parking currently along the property lines, which would currently constrain, in theory, the ability for any of those to ask, but again, they have the same situation. Their property all directly abuts onto the Morocco parking lot. And so, you know, the other sort of precedent challenge that is in my head is that it really only, if you live from 11 to 29 Bates Road, there is a clear way to get out onto what is in effect a private way owned by the school department. But then after that, there's not. But certainly, you know, they could ask as well, right? So, you know, especially with the Morocco, I think my number one concern right now is that we have zero idea what the strategic planning process is going to yield for what we do with the Morocco site. And I feel like there's sort of two levels on which that precedent setting operates. And one of them is, you know, well, what if we free that line of parking up, then does that mean that anybody all the way up to 55, 57 Irving could also ask to be let out from the back into Morocco property or whatever it happens to be in the future?
I mean, if you just look at the aerial view of Morocco, we are site constrained.
Very.
I mean, we have what I understand is, well, it's not a swimming hole. There's a pond at one point was contaminated. I don't know if that's still true. We have railroad tracks behind. Probably not the piece of property you would pick out if you were siting for a new school necessarily, although that's the challenge here always. But they're just, I mean, it's one road in, one road out, and it is very constrained. And we know it also slopes, and there are wetland issues. So,
And can I also ask one more question to Mr. Marin? So my understanding is we own two pieces of property on either side of the building, right? So there is what in essence right now is a path, but could potentially be a driveway in from Irving Street. So it's the property in between number 55, 57, and
Yeah.
60, whatever that's
That actually
numbered as.
used to be vehicular
That
access.
used to be the vehicular
Once
access,
upon a
right.
time, yeah.
Yeah.
So we own that, so confirming we own that piece. And then, from what I can see, we also own the loop at the end of Tufts Road.
That's also true. That's not a public way. So the bus loop is our property.
There is part of the greenway that goes through that area now, too, the
Yeah,
bikeway.
but but we had to approve that because it's our
Right.
property. So we gave an
Right,
easement.
so that's going to constrain our use of that property now, too,
'cause
or we're
that's-
going to eliminate the bikeway.
So it strikes me on that point.
So there's already precedent for going through our property for other reasons.
Mr. Hopcroft?
Thank you. So it strikes me on that point that if we redesign the entire site to optimize the school, we could probably work with the Tri-City Greenway to find a better path for them to come cut through our site rather than the middle, is my guess. Here, it strikes me that those lots, I mean, they're oddly shaped, very long lots, and they're all like that, and then suddenly they break into double lots, and it's not coincidental that that happens when you get to a public road that has access on the other side of those. Sort of echoing our prior meeting and some of the comments earlier, but maybe adding to them a little bit, I have concerns. One, first and foremost, is really around student safety. I visited the site, and when I was pulling out of Bates Road onto Washington Street, there's a crosswalk right on the left side, and there's a woman with her child and dog trying to cross the road, and a car stopped for them, and the cars behind them just laid on the horn and things, and it's not the safest of areas coming in and out of there, and so adding more cars is a little bit concerning. I echo the concerns about the precedent with the other houses and the slippery slope of additional curb cuts, as well as the flexibility around the new Morocco, and we talked about this at the prior meeting when the developers were here. The one additional piece, though, that we haven't talked about tonight is my recollection when we spoke to the developer about whether this was a deal breaker for them. They seemed open to the ability to have access off of Irving Street to both of their units. They said it wasn't optimal, but they'd prefer to come from the other side. But where this isn't even, because I support Mr. Betancourt's comment about inclusivity and wanting to have more affordable housing, it strikes me that the affordable housing isn't contingent unless something's changed, and there may be more information out there that I don't have. But when they met with us before, I don't know if that's your recollection as well, but I thought we asked them this, and we said, for all these reasons that we just cited, we're not super comfortable with this. Would this be a deal breaker? Could you configure your lot to come off the other side? And my recollection is they said yes.
I believe we did ask them about Irving Street
So,
egress.
And
Egress and
So, but my
ingress.
recollection, Mr. Hopcroft, is that the town has directed them that they need to get the curb cut from us before they will continue to talk to them about developing this piece of property.
well, so, I mean, I could see the town saying that we control that curb cut, but if we say, well, if we just don't take action on it, or we take action to disapprove it, the developer could still work with the town to.
But the town has directed them that we have to give the curb cut for them to work with the town to develop the affordable housing on the property.
They probably probably don't want to give them permission to build another structure without, because then you're gonna get an emergency vehicle access if they don't have a curb cut off of Bates. If you have two properties on that site, I would think that emergency services,
So, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, that was it.
Oh, okay.
Maybe finish your thought. Emergency
No, just,
vehicle access.
I mean, I would think that they would not allow two properties that are independent, that have people living in them as rental units without having a curb cut access on, to get to that front property that they would be constructing. That sending a fire truck through Irving to get to the back lot.
May I offer, and again, I'm not in their head, so I'm not suggesting this is sort of the goal, but because that front structure does appear that it could be an A&R filing, which is the easy way to go, the rear one would not be, for several reasons. One of the things that makes me uncomfortable, and I'm thinking back to some of the public comment we heard at town meeting around 160 Forest Street, when neighbors and abutters aren't informed and don't know what's going on, that's not good. I would be uncomfortable if the nature of the second structure, if it is a 40B and it sort of circumvents some of the whether it's site plan review or special permit, if the neighborhood loses the opportunity to be aware and have input because of the nature of that structure, and the reason it's moving forward is we allowed them to put in a curb cut, but we didn't actually even tell anybody about it, then I would actually have a problem with that too. I think the community has a right to understand what's being proposed, and if we were to facilitate that kind of conversation, my voice would certainly lend support for more affordable housing. I don't have a problem with the existing structure coming down. I don't have a problem with a new build with affordable housing units. My real concern is about that vehicular pedestrian intersection on Bates. And to underscore that, we told, I voiced, I don't think a committee member disagreed with me, that if what makes it happen is a widening of the curb cut off Irving Street to accommodate more cars, to accommodate emergency vehicles, that's something I'd be willing to support, which I think was the point you're trying to make. Is it, I'm not sure this project dies on the vine without a curb cut off Bates Road.
Yeah.
That's what the town's telling us.
I'd
the
like to hear
question that's
somebody from
coming
the
to
town
us-
say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the question that's coming to us is whether or not we approve a curb cut off of Bates Road. We're not talking about Irving, but I don't think we are making a decision about what they do with respect to their access from Irving Street.
Right, but Irving is only relevant because as abutters, if they wanted to widen the curb cut on Irving, we would have the right to say what we think about that. And I'm just suggesting we can get ahead of that and say, that's something we'd be willing to support.
And I guess I'm
Hypothetically.
suggesting, rather than killing an affordable housing project by voting tonight to not give them a curb cut on Irving, that perhaps we need to send it back to the town and say, we need more information about the project, the affordable housing component, and the site plan before we can make a decision on the curb cut. Because we're sitting here surmising a whole bunch of things tonight. The level of the land, whether it sets a precedent. We're not attorneys. We don't know whether it sets a precedent or not. We're trying to determine whether it can go, whether we're going to reroute roads, and we don't even know what project we're talking about yet. But what we do know is that if we vote down a curb cut tonight for this project, that the developer believes that kills any affordable housing project
So I
on
don't,
this site.
That's not what I heard them say.
that's
at the last
not my
meeting.
understanding. And we spent a lot of time at town meeting turning a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house on Forest Street, designating it as affordable housing. There's multi-unit structure there today. I'm just not sure I'm with you on that conclusion, Michelle. So I cannot support a curb cut off Bates Road, but I'm willing to have an open mind about other things we can do or support to accommodate affordable housing on the site.
And I agree. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh,
No, I was just gonna say, I agree. I didn't hear it that way. So what
can
I
go
remember
back to
them
the
saying
email.
was, what I remember them saying at the meeting that we had where they attended was, first of all, we are perfectly happy with the current state of the property as providers of rental housing. So I believe what's there is an existing 4-unit apartment property that they rent. And if I remember correctly from that meeting, what they said is they are satisfied with the current state of the property as a rental without being further developed. They're doing fine financially. Obviously, they would like to develop it into something more, right? But I also don't recall hearing that it was a deal breaker not to give the curb cut. And I have to be perfectly honest, like all of the stuff that we're talking about, that's why I reacted the way I did to what Mr. Nixon said. I don't actually think any of that is of tremendous significance too, because I do agree that there are concerns about kids and safety and walking and all of that, and I think that's on top of all of this. But on some very basic level, we have no idea what's going to happen with the Morocco property over the next X number of years, right? And I really don't think that there's any way we can say yes to a curb cut, regardless of all of these other issues, site grade, and I actually think those are the things for other boards and committees in town to sort through and have public hearings on and get, but I think on some very basic level, it would be unwise for us to constrain ourselves in advance of having any idea what's happening with the Morocco project to allowing a curb cut onto our private driveway, our private way, before we have any sense of what we're doing with that property. And so I think that doesn't, for me, it doesn't really matter beyond that, right? I think our only jurisdiction here is, do we want a curb cut onto what is currently labeled as Bates Road, but essentially is the driveway into the Morocco school, right?
Yep.
And I think the answer to that absolutely at this point is a resounding no. Not because I don't support affordable housing, not because I don't think that there are issues that would be very salient that would be raised with the ZBA and with the Affordable Housing Trust and all of the other boards and committees that need to weigh in on it, but because I think it's very unwise for us in this moment, not knowing what we're doing with that site, to move forward. And it doesn't preclude them, if they're happy with it as a rental property for the short to medium term future, it doesn't preclude them from coming back and asking us once we have a sense of what's going on. But I think it's extremely unwise for us to put that shackle on before we've planned. Because as Dr. Hackett said, I can entirely see that as we start to think about developing the property, we may need to put either parking or some other structure on that finger of land that goes out to Bates Road.
Yep.
In a configuration that would no longer allow a curb. I mean, goodness knows, we could put a line of trees there to separate the parking from their property, right? And that's certainly not, we're not gonna wanna extend a driveway further across our property onto what becomes the access road.
Yep.
In that case. So, or we may choose to build something there and put the access road on the other side, sort of have it jog around and go down the right side.
What
Mr.
Mr.
Hopcroft?
Vertrano said, for the record, is the plan as it currently stands would require a subdivision of the 11 to 13 Irving lot that would allow for a brand-new 4-unit building that includes a deed-restrictable affordable housing unit to be constructed on the lot. The catch, as previously mentioned, is the road in front of the property line on Bates Road is owned by the school. A curb cut would require an easement be granted from the road to the driveway. It sounds silly and is a bit technical, but this is what would be required for it to be built in the eyes of the town.
For the new structure to be built.
For the new structure with the affordable housing unit to be built.
But it looked like are they not building affordable housing in the existing structure? They're not tearing that down? Because that's what the rendering showed.
That he's not here tonight, so I don't know. And that's why I'm saying it's a little premature and without him being here.
I haven't
Yeah.
seen that email. Is that an email that was publicly shared with the committee?
I don't know.
Yeah, so,
And who, and I guess my other question would be who from the town made that, because I think.
That's what I'm saying,
other-
Mr.
yeah.
Matthews. I think you're on the same page with it. I'm saying that I'm not ready to vote on a curb cut here tonight without knowing what the project is and the town
And I think
requirements.
what I'm saying
feel
is
like-
I am ready to
Yeah,
vote
okay.
and say no.
I
And
think,
that's the disagreement, right?
yeah, because I'm not willing to vote down affordable housing until we know.
I'm not willing to vote down affordable housing
Mr.
either.
Hopcroft, I think, had a comment, so, oh, actually, I think you were finishing,
Go
but,
ahead. Yeah, I was.
yes.
Thank you. No, I was going to echo what Dr. Matthews was saying, and one of the other things I recall from the prior meeting was that at the time, that they didn't have urgency around building it, because we talked about the fact
Yeah.
that we're going to be building the school and perhaps reconfiguring
Correct.
all the space around it. And I think we suggested at the time that, A, we're not comfortable doing it now because of all these reasons, but as you just said, once the plans are in place, certainly once the school is built, we might be like, yeah, that's fine. We'll open up all those things because we don't need that flexibility anymore. It is, I will say, a little concerning that this is kind of presented as this voting down or contingent, affordable housing is contingent on us putting a curb cut in when no one has, from the developer is here or the town has told us that. That seems like a relevant piece of information, to have. Not sure it would change my view on it because, again, Dr. Matthews had stated very well, what I felt and had said at the prior meeting about it just doesn't make, we have a blank slate. You don't want to start mucking up your blank slate before you start drawing. And so, I continue to feel it doesn't make sense to grant a curb cut at this point. I continue to believe, because it's the only thing that the official developer actually told us, that it's not contingent on that, and that it's not an urgent thing, and they could wait until after we build this building. And so for all the, I'm not, and actually I would say, Ms. Bergstrom, I kind of agree with you. I don't know that we need to vote this down. They're asking us to grant them something,
Right.
and we could just not grant it to them.
You can just not vote, which would be what I would recommend at this
Which,
point.
just, may I just say for the record, that's kind of what we did the first time. So I thought
Well, they
we
have to come back
took
to
a
every
pass.
meeting.
So I
Yeah,
thought
you-
this was back on the agenda.
But you had not had a
because-
conversation, Mr. Nixon, about whether or not you were even amenable to the idea of doing it. So the developer walked away having no clue as to where they were with you. I think this discussion has been pretty clear.
Okay.
And I think that we can convey to the developer that you've taken no action for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is you don't even have all the information.
So my recollection of that meeting was that, I mean, there were some skeptics among the school committee, there were some proponents, but there was also a very clear statement made by the developer, which is they wanted to be 100% sure where that line was between the public street,
Correct.
the public way and our property. Because I think one of them even said, I have some doubt about whether, where we want to put the curb cut is really on your property. And we said, well, if that's the case, yes, you should go do your survey, because I think we all recognize property rights. And they said that they would do that. But I gather from what's been given to us, and I've seen the orange stakes on the ground, it corroborates what's in the GIS map, so.
Part of our real estate portfolio.
Yeah, so.
Right.
I just thought we were kind of waiting to hear the official results of the survey, which is, okay, yes, it actually is on your land, which I presume that it was. And then we were just going to wait for that so that then we could make a decision.
So I
But-
think the reason it came on the agenda again, Mr. Nixon, is because of what Dr. Hackett said, because I think they're waiting for us to go back to the town. And what I'm suggesting is, I think the town has sent them to us prematurely.
I would agree that I don't think, I I think the town ought to explore other opportunities for getting them the affordable housing on that, because I would hate to see the town vote down affordable housing.
Right.
But I don't think it changes
No.
the concern I have is by not voting, it makes it seem like coming back another time is gonna change where the school committee sits. And my sense is that the idea of granting a curb cut on this property in the next X number of years until the Morocco site is dealt with is not something, unless I'm misreading the sense of the board, it feels like a majority of the board are not willing to grant that in the next however many years it may be until
But by not voting, you're not granting it.
What-
Right, but
So
I,
then you don't have to unwind a vote if 6 years from now, it looks like, oh,
Absolutely.
this could work. And I also would just say, I don't think it's fair for the committee to be put in the position you're deciding affordable housing.
Affordable housing
Correct.
for the
Right, because
town.
you're not,
Totally
you are
agree.
not in charge of development in the town, you're not the planning board, you
I think
have a
what we
curb
are in
that they
charge
need
of-
access to, so it would seem to me, and I think this is what you were saying, Ms. Hopcroft, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. I feel like the town's got some work to do.
Yeah.
Like they should be here supporting,
what I was saying.
okay, I mean,
And I think what school committee does have charge and purview of is thinking of our schools. And when I look at this and I think of the future of the Morocco School and what we're going to be doing with rebuilding it, renovating it, whatever we may choose to do, it's important to have that flexibility to be able to make choices as to how we're going to use that property, those entry points, redevelop it, et cetera, and just keep that flexibility. I don't think that we can constrain ourselves as we try to envision this project down the road.
Okay, so
Down the
just
road
some
again.
middle ground.
So,
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were at the end of that.
and I also support affordable housing. I think that I agree with Dr. Hackett that I think there's a lot of work that has to be done here and some thought from the town's perspective on how, and the levers that they can pull to bring this into being.
So if I could suggest perhaps a middle ground, it seems that the strongest concern is around flexibility around the new Morocco building, right? And it seems that the developer had expressed not having a concern around the urgency of the timing. They want to be able to develop it at some point. We're planning to build this building in 2030. What if we just vote to say we don't grant a curb cut between now and 2030, and we'll revisit it then, once things are settled? And then, the developer, if that's not a concern for them, the timeline, they can come back, and if it's just a road like it is now, and, maybe it's clearer where the cutoff line should be for all the knock-on houses. And for us, it preserves the clean slate for us to do the project.
But I
I
don't
guess
think
my-
you want to, I don't think that we would want to bind the hands of a future committee to have to vote in 2030
Oh,
about a curb cut of the future. Yes.
So I was
Mr.
I was going to make a similar but slightly different suggestion, and I agree with what you just said. So when no board or committee can bind the hands of a future, right? I'm much more in Dr. Matthews' camp. I feel like we can vote tonight to deny a request for a curb cut off Bates Road for this proposal, full stop, with the understanding that the request can still come back to the school committee, like in April or May, for crying out loud. It could be a different committee, and there may be new information. But also, we can reconsider. So if there is something, I'm sort of getting mixed messages. So it sounds like if the town needs us to take a position, we can take that position, let the developer have that discussion with the town and say, okay, now that X, Y, Z is understood, now here's what we want, or here's what we need, and here's why. If we have new perspective, I want this to be in the minutes, Dr. Matthews. I have no problem reconsidering, if there's new information. I just don't. But I think like pushing out to 2030, that actually would kind of make it more of an unwinding thing. But if we just say no now, anybody can make a motion to reconsider. But you can also just come back to the school committee in the spring and say, okay, well, this is what happened on November 19th, but now we have this information, we'd like you to consider this, and the committee would.
Can I ask a clarification? 'Cause I think I like that. But one of the things I thought I heard you say, but then you didn't elaborate on, was we can deny this project request, which suggested to me
Curb
that.
cut.
Yeah, but I guess a curb cut associated with this project, they could come back in the spring or whatever time saying, okay, this is a new request or a new, we're denying the current request. Is that what you're saying?
I guess my motion would be that the school committee denies the request for a curb cut on what is labeled Bates Road, but which is the property of the Winchester Public Schools under the control of the school committee.
I think the committee needs to consider the message it sends, because you here have had a conversation about supporting affordable housing, right? You should not be in a position where you're voting on something you don't have enough information on, that's half-baked, and then being seen as not allowing affordable housing. I think this is unfair for this to be in front of you right now. I think the town needs to figure out what they want to do. If they want to advocate, if they want to come in and talk about how they can make this work, I think someone else has a responsibility besides you. I think you doing a hard stop on this, I just don't think it's a good, I don't think it's the message you believe. It shouldn't be connected to you. That's,
So,
I think there's some danger in you doing that, because it's not how you feel, and I think some people might read that action as exactly that.
I appreciate everything you just said, but if we don't do anything, I will voice my frustration because I thought we talked about it in the first round and it was pretty clear the support wasn't there and I thought it was coming back because we needed to take a position. So we've had a great conversation. I mean, at least it's on WinCam if people want to go back and watch it. I'll defer to the board.
But I think a lot of stuff has come to light in this conversation, Mr. Nixon, that I think Dr. Hackett echoes exactly the way I feel about this, is that you have brought up lots of information about the site. Dr. Matthews has brought up a bunch of information about hypotheticals about rerouting roads, and we don't have a project. We have a concept of a project here. But if we deny the concept of a project of affordable housing, then we've been the ones to deny the concept of a project of affordable housing.
This is the same committee.
This is
The
not
same
a
committee that didn't
project
want
yet.
to support the Mystic HVAC project because you didn't have enough information. I've never known this committee to make a decision without a mind-numbing amount of information and detail, much to my chagrin at many times, but you don't have any information on this.
For the record, I don't think we said we didn't support it. We said, this all sounds good. What are you doing about the
Fine,
chronically cold
Fine, I was trying to make a
spaces?
dramatic point, but go ahead.
I'm going to challenge you on that one,
Okay,
Dr.
fine.
Hackett.
I'm supportive of holding on this and saying, let's get more information. But I think we should be clear that one of the things that's a sticking point is the fact that we need more information about what we plan to build, too.
I think you should just not take action and not ask for any more information and let someone else figure out what they want to do with you.
I would actually make a motion to send it back to the town to work on it. If it's an affordable housing project, it should be going through the town, not through us.
I guess,
That would be my motion, would be to send the proposal for 11 to 13 Irving and Bates Road to the town, to Housing Partnership, Planning Board, and entities of the town that manage affordable housing. We shouldn't be managing affordable housing at the school committee table.
What does that mean, though? Someone says, can you approve a curb cut? And we send it to the town and other planning boards.
This curb cut may not be exactly where it's showing on this map at the moment, Mr. Hopcroft. This is like the concept of where they think a curb cut might be. It could be in a different location on this site. It could go through Irving Street. It could be emergency access only. It might only be a curb cut there that only fire trucks can get through. Might be the compromise that the town comes to with the developer in terms of building to get an affordable housing unit on the site. So there is way not enough information. I'm unclear why we are being the guardrails and the guard keepers of this project before the town has done its due diligence on it.
so I guess,
So,
can I?
go ahead.
So my question is, so who in the town says that we need to, because my understanding from when we met with the developer was that the developer saw us as the gatekeeper, not, so
It
is
was the
there someone in
information
the
that
town?
I
Their
just, the
interpretation.
developer contacted, was it you, Mr. Marin?
Yeah, and we reached out to the town planner. who
Right.
Referred to us. Yep.
And sorry, Mr. Mayor, the town planner said that we needed to first approve, because that, to me, that doesn't comport
grab
at
the
all
email.
with
I'll have to find it.
the
Yeah.
way this works.
And we clarified also.
So I'm coming right
So
right
I would
around
send it back to him.
I'm coming right around to where you are, because it's a big, I'm not sure that I'm a yes, but it's a big difference if it's one of those, if it's like the access that there is further down, where it's a fire truck only, pathway.
Right.
So that would perhaps be different. I don't know. You know, like, it still has.
It might address the number of cars that are exiting
It
on
addresses-
Bates Road,
it
for
addresses the
example.
safety and the vehicle traffic, but not
Right.
necessarily the flexibility. But so, you know, it is very premature to come to us, although I wouldn't want to give them the sense that,
Correct.
you know, yeah, I think I would express that there's a lot of concern that we don't want to constrain our property, but, you know, if there's a fire
Absolutely.
in a building and you want to bring a fire truck in to put it out, we might make an exception for that, you know,
Right.
and you can make your property, you know. a fire
It
truck.
doesn't even make any sense at all that this is hanging on you, at all. I can't even,
It makes no sense.
no
to me.
sense.
Right.
Yeah.
And-
So,
And can I, sorry, Ms. Bowen, can I say one more thing? Is it okay?
Okay.
So I think my biggest concern about this is that we should not be put in a position where it is interpreted in any way that this committee does not support affordable housing, right, in this town. And I think that my concern with what Ms. Bergstrom said earlier is that, you know, there would be this perception that we are against affordable housing. I don't accept that. I actually think that,
That was
you know-
actually Dr. Hackett.
oh, sorry, but I think,
I
I,
personalize it.
what I'm really struggling with on this is the fact that I believe that the onus on, if individual for-profit developers want to come to the town with a project, if it does actually have affordable housing attached to it, it is still something that is, I believe, their responsibility to do the due diligence and applications that need to be done through town boards and committees to get that project approved, right? I understand that there are benefits to the town to get an affordable unit as part of that, but if it is a independent for-profit developer, the thing that I think I reacted to, just to be very clear from the first meeting, was it felt like what the developer was doing was coming to us and saying, no, you need to give me the yay or the nay as to whether I'm willing to build this on this site because it's the only way I'm going to get a larger number of units. And I'm happy, what I very much remember him saying was, we're happy to sort of sit on this 4-unit existing structure and take rent out of it, right? But we'd really prefer to have more units, and it appears from the rendering they're looking for 8 units instead of 4, right, which is an expansion of the number of units on the property. And other town boards and committees may have a very strong opinion on that. But I very much remember him saying when he met with us that it was a no-go probably unless they could get that curb cut onto our property. And I don't think that that's the right or appropriate. And if there are other people in the town, let me just say for the purposes of WinCam, if there are other people in the town that sent him to us, I'm disappointed to hear that because I don't think that's our purview at all. I think they should hash through all of the issues of, you know, whether that's an appropriate number of developed square feet to put on this size of lot, whether access is possible, whether emergencies are, like, all of those things should happen before we even have to weigh in on it. But regardless, to Mr. Hopcroft's point, like, I think we've also made very clear what our position is on the curb cut given the potential development of Morocco. But it's not the right way to do it, in my opinion. And I believe, maybe I'm wrong, that it's the onus of the individual private for-profit developer to actually go through the correct processes with the planning board, with the zoning board of appeals, with, you know, whatever affordable housing committees. Like, there are many other people who can do that due diligence that Mr. Nixon was talking about and get the information and communication out to members of the town and abutters. Sorry, I'm gonna stop.
Well, and
So
I
the
think you're
issue-
hitting on, Dr. Matthews, exactly what my issue is that you're now talking about who's has the right to be on this lot. So that's what I'm saying, that they were sent to us first. And I'm saying we should just send it back to them. We should send it not back to the developer, but back to the town and say, send the developer back to the town and say, you work out the plans with the town. Because as proposed, I'm not for or opposed to a curb cut on this street until I know all of that other information. Because the moment we just shut it down, I think somebody's looking for us to shut it down easily.
So now I'm coming back to what Mr. Hopcroft said, which is, You know, Mr. Nixon's already made a compelling argument that we shouldn't be time bounding it, but I want to be as clear as we can possibly be, right?
Right.
And that's where I'm really struggling with this, is I want to be as clear as we can possibly be, and I do not see any situation in which I personally, as a member of this board, would vote yes in the next however many years it takes us to get to a real clear understanding of what's happening with the Morocco property. And if their bottom line is they're A, not willing to do this without the curb cut onto our property, and B, not willing to do it unless it can be done in the next 18 months or something like that, then there's.
And I'm not sure it's willing or not
I think that we
willing.
can, again, I do not think that we can tie the hands of a future committee.
Could
So-
could I suggest a way to rectify that?
Yeah.
What if we just vote it down and say, as you get this thing figured out, if all you're looking for is fire truck access or some lesser thing, come back to us and we'll reconsider it.
But I think what Dr. Hackett is saying to us is that is that we do not have a need to take action on this tonight, and that is the same thing. And the other proposal that has come up is making a motion to send this back to the town for further review. I personally am not even sure that we need that. I think that if we just take no action, then the developer has to go back to the town anyway, and that's of their own accord. That's not something that we, school committee, can tell them or what. So that is
I
their,
mean, I'll say, the developer has to be working with the town, because the frontage on Irving Street requires it. So whether we vote a curb cut up or down, they're working with the town for a substantial portion of the development. I want to just remind the committee, this question of precedent is still very present in my mind. A great parcel for this project is 17 to 15 Irving Street. It's right next door. It's another multi-unit house with a parking lot behind it, a striped parking lot. And in fact, the grades are less problematic there. You could go next door to number 19. Same thing. So if we were to say yes to this, what's to prevent another developer from coming in and
Because
saying, I
one
wanna-"
board can't tie the hands of a future board. I thought we just determined that.
No, I'm just saying, if we were to,
So
if we
each
were,
could be taken as an
if we
individual
were to
project.
approve, if we were to approve, then any other developer could come in. Originally, I think we were talking about like private homeowners saying, oh, I'd like to have a curb cut too, but you know, it could actually be another development very similar to this. So what we're talking about here is a curb cut off of Bay. It's accommodating at least 4 cars. It could be another one next door, another 4 cars, another one next door, 4 cars. We're introducing more and more vehicular traffic. And I said to this committee in May and June, there's one other place where a property owner could argue precedent, and that's on Oneida Road. Because if you wanted to put a curb cut into the parking lot at Ambrose, you could. I mean, you physically could do it today. I presume we would say no, because it's a parking lot at Ambrose, and here we have a parking lot and access at Morocco. So just think precedent, it's not just about Morocco. This condition where private property backs up to school property exists elsewhere in town.
Right, and I would say to the not binding a future committee, I think right now there's a bright line that it's at our property line.
Right.
I think it's hard for a future committee or a current committee if it's like, well, you let them have it and you know, that it substantially increase the value of their property, why won't you let me have it? It's just, I think it's just a harder thing for future committees to.
I think it is, but I think each property also gets closer to the school building, and you could make an argument that, I mean, this is feet away from the neighbor's driveway.
Yeah.
So you could also make, another future committee could say, yes, we allowed that one because of where it's sited, but now the siting doesn't work anymore. We could have a whole new road into the school building by that point that would make those other properties not even possible for that. So I think we're talking about so many hypotheticals at this point without even knowing what project, which is why I would prefer we just don't take action on it and allow the town to work out what the project even is.
So what would you recommend?
so do you rescind the motion that you made?
Well, I think we already decided that we couldn't do that. We can't send it back, according to Mr. Nixon, we can't just send it back to the town.
There's nothing to send back. The question about the curb cut is the question for us.
It's a
Everything else is on the town.
question. I see
But
that
I
as
think it's a
completely-
premature
Is that-
question.
What'd you say, Dr. May?
I just see that as a completely independent question.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, literally everything else falls under the purview of the town, except this one issue.
Multiple boards and committees, to be clear, but
Yes.
But
So-
I don't even know the size of the curb cut, the length of the width of the curb cut. How, is it gonna be sited right there, or is it gonna be where the walkway is?
It doesn't
I
matter.
don't have
I don't care
anything
if it's
to
an
approve.
airstrip. If there's 8 cars coming out of there on a base
Yeah.
road, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And I just wonder why you're being put in the position of having to kill this project by not providing a curb cut, and there's no town representative
Right.
trying to advocate for affordable housing here, trying to work with you as a department on, this is what we could try, I mean, it's a developer who's come in, we don't really know who they are, they've asked for this, they've been told to come here, and now you are in this position, which I just think is inherently unfair.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that, I think that in normal circumstances, someone comes completely unprepared and forces a board to take a position, they should expect it's gonna be a no. But in this case, maybe we just don't, as you say, send it back to the town, don't take action on it. But I think there's a lot that other people should work out, and it,
Well, no action is action,
yeah.
right? By
Yeah,
not
but-
taking action, you have sent the message, they don't have a curb cut.
That's what we did in the first meeting.
But maybe we have
Mr.
someone.
Nixon,
Maybe someone,
don't be silly.
maybe someone. can
But
have a
Mr.
friendly
Nixon, to be
So-
fair, I feel like the developer has been trying to do due diligence and work with us, because that's what they've been told to do, and we've been trying to get information from them.
Have we? I mean, we saw them once. I don't know who else is communicating with them.
I feel like the developer should not have been put in that position.
Right, that's what I'm
Okay,
saying.
that's fair, that's fair.
So,
Can I make a
Dr.
suggestion?
Hackett and Mr. Marin.
If not a motion, is it helpful to say that while the school committee is supportive of affordable housing, we're not inclined to grant a curb cut request at this time? We welcome more additional information.
I don't think we comment on
And
affordable
are open to
housing at all.
reconsidering. Because otherwise, if we just take no action, what message is that? If we're saying we'd like to get more information, we should say that.
Why not mention affordable housing, just since it's been mentioned that
Yeah.
if we vote no on this, that
Because
it means
everyone
we
keeps
don't-
making the point, the only thing we have authority over is the curb cut.
Right, but people have been making a point that if we vote no on the curb cut, it means we don't support affordable
Agreed.
housing. And so it seems maybe we should.
Well, I'm
counter
saying
that.
it would send the message that we don't support affordable housing, so it would kill the project.
I think you reject the process.
Right, thank you.
so,
Okay?
That's what I'm saying.
Like,
Dr.
this is
Hackett-
not the right
Make a
process.
motion to abandon this process.
Exactly.
So Dr. Hackett and Mr. Marin, what do you need from school committee?
Has this been helpful?
Oh, I'm happy to convey the message.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
know
we
that.
can let them know the discussion. They can watch it on WinCam. I mean, I don't know,
With
I'm not going to
popcorn.
suggest that they come back at a later time, but this process is flawed. And it's not the developer's fault necessarily, but it's certainly not your fault.
Yeah, I think a
Nixon.
vote of no action, or no action would be fine for us to communicate to the developer. I'll share your concerns, and that more detail would be appreciated to reconsider anything in the future.
And I'll be at Housing Partnership tomorrow night and can report back to the committee if,
And if the developer says, what more detail does the school committee need, what is that answer?
Here's the link.
We need to hear,
Go to wincam.org, I like that, okay. Good.
I like that answer.
For your viewing pleasure.
Pull it up on your phone.
I love how much
I don't
we're
think we
talking
want to
about
hear from the
education
developer
tonight.
again. I think we need to hear from the town,
Right.
so.
All right,
Well, this has been fun.
so, yes.
We've learned so much.
I'm getting punchy, too.
All right. So the decision at this point then from the school committee is not to take an action on the developer's request for the curb cut on Bates Road. And Mr. Marin and Dr. Hackett will go back to the developer to communicate that.
Or the town.
All right, so next up at 8:02 is the Finance Subcommittee update on FY26 budget development, and you have in your packets a memo from Ms. Bergstrom, as well as the slide deck. Ms. Bergstrom, would you like to?
I was going to say, Mr. Marin, did you want to go through the slide deck, or they,
Oh, yes.
Folks had a copy of the memo in their packet.
I think it's.
I don't need to read it.
I think it's enough just to summarize them.
You want a quick synopsis, or-
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we met recently with our finance subcommittee, and we reviewed our progress to date on our budget timeline. Some check marks there, good progress internally, getting feedback from principals and department heads, and as well as a district-wide survey that went out. And we'll remain open for the rest of the month and getting some good feedback on that. And then we went into district fees, and reviewed those programs and those associated revolving funds around athletics and elementary music, and our early childhood preschool program. And then some more, we went through some enrollment updates, the same number you saw tonight. And then did a little, very high-level overview of Chapter 70 and how that money, or some of the lack thereof of that money, makes it to us. And then went through Chapter 70 and how that then ties into your per pupil, and did some math on our comparison per pupil with our comparison communities, and how much kind of how we rank amongst our comparison communities here.
And
So,
the numbers
yeah.
at the top, Mr. Marin, were how much more we would need to add to our budget to match, if we wanted to match their per pupil, that's how much more money we would need in our
Yeah,
budget.
so if we took our enrollment numbers and applied our
Right.
comparison districts per pupil spending, that's how much more money we would have in our budget. And we highlighted a few districts. Our comparison district average is in the middle, so if we just took the average of all of our comparison districts, we'd have $15.8 million more. If we took Wellesley's budget, we'd have over $37 million more. So,
And the one to the left, I thought, based on what I heard listening to the webinar, that was Arlington, so.
Arlington's here.
Oh, the 2
Arlington
million?
2 million
was-
more.
was
Yeah.
2 million more.
Mr. Marin, could you just say that again for the benefit of WinCam?
Sure.
Thank
So-
you.
So we did an analysis, so we have all of our comparison communities, which I think the school committee defined a while back.
Yep.
So we went and looked at our per pupil, which is the FY '23 number, so it's always 2 years behind what's official. And then we looked at our comparison districts and what their per pupil spending is. And then we took their per pupil spending and applied it to our enrollment count, because it varies district to district. And so if you apply that per pupil spending to our enrollment, this is the difference that we get. So the top schools here, their spending is less than us, and you can see where we fall, and everyone below that red line is higher than us in per pupil spending. And the next slide just charts that, so you can kind of see the change, and we highlighted a few districts.
So it's not the delta between us and them, it's actually if we applied their per pupil to
Our-
our enrollment.
Per pupil count to their enrollment.
Right, if
Or
we had their pure
per pupil
pupil
expenditure
count.
to
Our
enrollment.
enrollment, correct,
So the 37 million is the delta between,
where we are.
it's our student body
Right.
with Wellesley's per pupil.
Correct.
Would be $37 million
Right.
more on a $60-something million budget. So-
And Wellesley's pupil count is very close to ours. So that is really
A real number.
taking our budget and comparing it against their budget. It's a real number.
Well, and people often like to use Wellesley as a comparison district. Talk about
That's what I've heard.
The things they produce, yeah.
Yeah,
And I have one more question for you. In terms of the per pupil expenditure, this is also potentially for WinCam, but have you actually confirmed that our per pupil expenditure in Winchester is an apples to apples comparison with other communities in Massachusetts? Are there substantial differences in how our per pupil expenditure is calculated versus comparison districts on the list on slide 17?
So we all calculate the same as part of the state report. Where the variability happens often is in indirect costs. So, for example, the town runs our facilities. So at some point years ago, if you have indirect costs, there's always an agreement about what percentage of the cost of, for example, the DPW is what percent of their cost is because of us. And there's a kind of a cost share that there's no exchange of money, but that when we put in our end-of-year report, the town gets credit essentially for providing those services at a certain level. So that factors into our per pupil. There are some school systems that own their own transportation departments, they own their own facilities, so they own all of it. But that agreement and the percentages are locally, it's a local decision as to how to share that. But we're not talking about that throwing off the per pupil by thousands of dollars per student.
To be clear, DESE and the state government find it accurate enough to use it in other calculations that apply to things that are important to school districts.
Absolutely. It is their comparison. My only point is that DESE also, the state does not say, this is the cost-sharing formula that you have to use at the local level if you set your district up like this. So really, the only variability is in that number.
But it's not that none of those costs are being baked in. So as you said, there are other districts that have transportation departments, et cetera, that may be handled at town level.
Right.
And some allocation of those costs is made. So it's not that towns where those costs are shared with the town, none of that cost is then baked into the per pupil expenditure. So
Correct.
some attempt to allocate those costs appropriately is made in order to create the DESE numbers.
Correct.
Can I follow up? Just a quick clarification. So
Right.
I'm assuming that DPW staff who are building-based, like custodians, those absolutely get reported. The only real cost sharing to figure out would be some of our licensed trades, like electricians, plumbers, who could get called to town hall one day, Morocco another. We have some core team folks who are not based at school buildings, but spend some time.
Right.
Think about the trash pickup, for example, is a good example.
Town hall, we have treasury, pays our bills, and what's the cost share of that? So that's really
Payroll.
where there's
So,
some math
so we're
involved.
talking about a fairly manageable number of people for
Yes.
whom we're sharing.
Yes.
Because there are a lot of DPW employees, all they do is school stuff.
Absolutely,
Okay.
right.
But I think, and I think this is Dr. Matthews' point, DESE looks at the categories, and whether you outsource or insource to DPW or to a third-party transportation provider, transportation is accounted for in any, in their numbers. So is, custodial services, so are, like all of these categories. And so all we're talking about is really some around the edges, about exactly how you account for that.
Yeah.
But it's
I think-
also health
yeah.
insurance and benefits too, which is a big chunk.
It does
That
include
is the
health?
majority,
Okay.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, and when you really dig into a lot of the schools, it's really personnel that drives it. Like, look at Wellesley, they just have a lot of support.
Right.
Look at their business office, and they have, maybe close to 20 people, we have 5.
The bottom line is that this is an apples-to-apples comparison,
Right.
as close as it can.
It's as close as you're going to get
Yeah.
to an apples-to-apples comparison. And like I said, the peer pupil expenditure exists precisely for this kind of calculation and this reason for the state. So, not so much for districts that are well-resourced, but to show the discrepancy between well-resourced districts.
Yeah, it's the basis of the foundation budget, which is then the basis of
Right.
Chapter 70 funding. So this sets up the entire state finance structure for public schools.
So it's serious and it's rigorous, and
Yes.
it's the best comparison that exists
Correct.
between the schools.
And the state wants it to be accurate, too.
Right.
And there's no, I guess my last point then, just to put a very, very fine point on it, is that there's no benefit to recalculating our numbers to try and sort of unskew our numbers, that this is the best way that Winchester can represent under its structure, our per pupil
The
costs.
only way to recalculate would be to recalculate everybody's. So we would have to have
In the whole state.
In the whole state.
In the whole state.
So we'd have to have every indirect cost agreement, we would have to have all that information. And so yes, the answer to your question is no, there's no.
So in summary, this is consistent with what the state advises for the calculation. Requires for the per pupil expenditure calculation.
So a lot of smart people put a lot of time into figuring out how to make this fair, and we should rely on it.
And there's a reason they publish them on their website.
Yeah. And
Yes.
it directs a lot of money.
A lot of money.
And it involves
at the
more
state
than
level.
just DESE. It's the Department of Revenue.
True.
It gets audited,
It's from
we
the
get
state.
audited.
You get audited.
And I think I want to ask Mr. Marin to just, so if we can go back for one more second, I just want to highlight that cyan blue row. And so how did you calculate that? Just to, I think I know already, but I just want to make sure that we say that.
So it's just, if you take these districts and you do an average, that's what that number represents.
Including the 3 that are below us.
Yep. And then we just ranked it in where that average ranks.
Right. So were we to take an average of every single one of these, including the 3 that are below us, it would still implicate an additional $15.8 million per year in our budget to hit the mean number in our comparison district set.
Correct. And just putting on my Chris Nixon hat for a minute, these
That's
comparisons.
always too big on me.
The comparison districts on here, DESI compares districts in 2 ways. They compare them by its relative wealth, and what's the other comparison they use? Is it size and relative wealth?
I'm forgetting the exact term.
Yeah. But these districts were chosen a number of years ago in collaboration with the town and the unions, because they were who we believed as a community. So it was based on both statistical information sort of and perception. So it was to try to collaborate with the people that this matters to in town, and to try to find communities that, you know, Winchester associates with, as well as towns that are not just identified by DESI. So if you go find our comparison towns on DESI, most of these towns come up under our comparison towns, but not all. So that's just where this list has originated, and do you know how many years ago that was done, Mr.
I
Nixon?
was actually still looking at the Decisions 01890 website for the override, which I never turned off, so that was 2018.
And it existed on that because we'd used them before.
Sorry,
that even.
FY 18, so it was, it was a couple years
It
before then.
preexisted that.
So just to summarize that point, the towns that are, the comparison districts that are listed here are towns that have been agreed upon between or among the town, the schools, and the union,
In the past,
And the
yeah.
Finance Committee.
In the Finance
and the
Committee.
finance committee. Okay. Dating back to 2017 or earlier.
No,
think
it
it's
was before
before that.
17, like 20,
Because they existed
For
when
many
I
years.
came on school committee.
For many years.
say that again?
This list of towns existed the first time I entered contract negotiations on school
Yeah,
committee.
I think
so
it was,
that-
we
I'm
started the
2017.
conversation in Bill McAuliffe's last year, and I think we'd established that list when Judy came on board, so that's like 2015.
Yeah.
And it's been a good
It's
list to
been a
work
good
with.
list, because it captures some things that the DESI comparison towns don't.
Mr. Mayor, did you have more to?
That's my update.
So I would just say we've changed the format of Finance Subcommittee a little bit this year. We've been holding the meetings in the evening over webinars. At the end of the meeting, if there's time, we open just the Q&A where people can type questions in. We've only had one person who has participated in that so far, but the PAs are posting, the parent associations have been posting the finance subcommittee meetings in the parent association newsletters. We're trying to not only talk about our budget, but as Mr. Marin indicated, with a little bit on, we talked a little bit about pure pupil expenditure in Chapter 70. So we're trying to help people understand not only how we're building the FY26 budget, but how school budgets are built, and the kind of information and things we think about when they go into them as well. So we have also been trying to sort of pick particular topics or themes around the finance subcommittee meetings as well. So as Mr. Marin said, you can see in the memo some of the topics we've covered, and I believe our next one is on special education funding.
Yes, next Tuesday, no, not Thursday.
Next Tuesday, not Wednesday.
Wednesday, yep.
Next Tuesday evening. Yeah.
And could you just remind me, these meetings are recorded?
Recorded,
What?
not recorded, Mr. Marin, do you know? I don't pay
We've been
attention.
recording them.
Are they recorded? Yes.
Recorded.
Yep.
But they are on Zoom. There's public Zoom link for anybody who wants to attend.
Recorded but not posted
Okay.
yet, so we can do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of good context in there that, it's unfortunate that moving it to 7 PM, we thought it would be a good time to get more participation. And we've been really trying to answer a lot of the questions that come up later in the budget process or when we present a budget by educating people. And so it's sort of unfortunate that not a lot of people have participated yet at this point.
But we have been trying to promote them at different, if I'm meeting with different organizations in town, I have been trying to put the word out, so, or if I've been talking with different parents. So I think it's up upon all of us to talk with.
And maybe people already feel well-informed, but there's certainly another opportunity here to learn a little bit more.
And I've been characterizing it as if you want to learn about the challenges of school budget development, then please tune in to these webinars that our school committee finance subcommittee is running on a bi-weekly basis as we develop the budget, the FY26 budget.
If I may, can I make a point just that requires a graphic? It's a very similar chart to what Mr. Marin just showed, but it's on the income side. It takes like 30 seconds. Can you go decision 01890?
Is that a website?
Yeah. If you just Google it, it'll come up. Okay, go to costs, upper right-hand corner. And if you scroll, so this is that same list of communities we just looked at. Here we were showing on the left the residential tax rate. Winchester way off on the left without the override. We're talking about the operating override we passed. And the point we made was we would be middle of the pack with the approval of the override on our tax rate. But because of our assessments in town, look on the chart on the right. This is actually the tax bill. So our tax bill was going from that blue bar on the left to the blue bar on the right, and only, 5 communities on top of us. So I wanted to raise this because this is a headwind we run into sometimes, is a lot of folks in Winchester can't understand. Why is our per pupil spending this, but my taxes are this? And you can look at some of these communities on this list and understand, what does that chart say? Average single-family home tax bill. So that's residential. We don't have a large commercial tax base that we can rely on. So I just think it's important, and it'd be interesting, I should go in and update this. This was based on FY18. I expect the chart will look sort of similar today. So what we spend is really important, but we do need to be mindful of what we're taking in.
I would add one more metric moving forward, and that
Yeah.
would be average income.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
per household. Yeah, it's a good one.
Because that puts a little context around that average tax bill.
I'm writing that down.
Well, and I think that's where on the DESI site, if you look at comparable towns by wealth,
I mean, the site you shared with me after I spent hours downloading spreadsheets.
yes.
Thank you, Andrew.
This is why, by the way, we need to own more solar so we can drive down our
My God,
costs.
do
on
we
the-
have
on
to
the
tie
building.
it back to solar?
Okay.
Wait a minute,
we
we
don't-
don't have another hour, Mr.
We don't have more commercial.
Do it, John.
Fifth time the superintendent has put his head in his hands.
Yeah, you either have to get more commercial or to lower our costs on energy bills.
All right. Any further comment or questions on the FY26 budget development?
And I know we're almost done, but I have a family emergency and I have to run out.
Oh.
Okay,
Okay.
hope everything's all right.
Yeah, thank you. It will be.
Next on our agenda then is
Policy.
the policy subcommittee policy update. So first readings for all of us, and these are around policy ILD, student submission to educational research. I'm going to read this since I didn't read it the first time.
No, you did. You read them at the
I
top
think
of
I
the
just
agenda.
read
Yeah.
the,
You
I just
them
read
at
the
outset.
letters,
Sure, the
but,
letters.
okay. So we do have a memo on this in your binders, so just summarizing this. So, let me just see. with respect to additions, we only had the one addition, which was ILD, student submission to educational research. This was brought to us by Dr. Hackett. It's a federally required policy, so to align the WPS manual with federal requirements, Dr. Hackett had recommended this to be added. Further on that, we have several updates. The main one being the bullying prevention and response plan. This goes through, this is a plan that the district has that is, works hand in hand with our policy JICFA on anti-bullying. Policy JICFA has remained the same. There's no update to it at this point. But the bullying prevention and response plan itself has just been updated, has had some minor updates to it regarding WPS curriculum, some course names, other small changes. So we're looking, Dr. Hackett will be looking for feedback from other stakeholders over the upcoming weeks. Policy JJ on co-curricular and extracurricular activities. This just had, there were several bullet points in this, in our manual, and the first two bullet points have been deleted from the MASC policy. And I think Aaron had added a file with all of the policies that were coming before us tonight in it, and their updates. Policy JJA on student organizations. Right now, our the MASC manual states that if there are controversial student organizations that need to be approved, our manual at this point says that school committee is supposed to make that decision. But the MASC manual states that the principal and the superintendent are supposed to make these decisions. So this is just an adjustment to bring that into alignment with the MASC manual. Policy JKA is on corporal, it just moves, in alignment with MASC, just moves the corporal punishment policy into JKAA. So one has been deleted and one has been added in, and has been added instead into JKAA, which is on physical restraint of students. And policy KCD is on public gifts to the schools. Right now, our manual says that the superintendent is supposed to accept these public gifts, but MASC, and as has been our practice, states that school committee is supposed to accept public gifts. And then we also had a number of deletions from the MASC manual. Dr. Matthews, do you want to go over some of those? Because you've also joined me on policy, subcommittee, and my voice is sort of going wonky.
What would you like me to?
If you'd just like to summarize the deletions, if you have it in front of me. I just happen to have
from your. Do you want me to just read the
from
memo?
the memo. Yeah, I guess so. Just
Okay.
summarize. Or you could just say that these policies have been deleted.
Yeah. So I think probably the best way to summarize it, and forgive me because I'm very new to this, but I think the best way to summarize it is that there have been things that are recommended by MASC, which I, as you all know, had the good fortune to go to their training that's statutorily mandated for new school committee members this fall. And there are sort of some best practices that they come out with on a regular basis for how policies can be amended. And section 3 of the chair's memo basically goes through places where MASC has recommended we delete things from district handbooks so that there's as much similarity across the state as possible. And so the policy subcommittee, in large part, it's the chair, who also is the chair of the policy subcommittee, who's been doing this hard work for a very long time in collaboration with the district staff. But both Dr. Hackett and Ms. Allen have gone through and made sure, which is wonderful, that we have consistent policies across all district student handbooks that are deleted in the places where MASC has recommended it. And so I guess there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 current deletions that were made to approval of handbooks and directives, personnel policies and goals, occupational education, contest for students. Those last 2 were deleted. And the last one was the student policies goals. And so we are updating our handbooks to reflect the deletions that MASC has recommended. I tried not to read what was on the memo.
I might have been guilty of that.
So I will also say, as long as I have already taken the floor on this, that the work that is being done is tedious and laborious, but we have an absolutely wonderful team that is doing a great job of going through all these. And I think I'll make the same point that I made at our last meeting, which is some of these are things that we, certainly folks before I have been working on for up to 3 years. I think that's a fair time frame. And so it's really a very detail-oriented task. And so thank you to the chair of the committee and the chair of the subcommittee for her work, and obviously to the superintendent and his amazing assistant who are doing
More so her.
fantastic work on this.
And our enthusiasm.
I'm just, I'm
You've been a
brand
great
new.
addition. You
Yeah,
both are
we-
very detail-oriented.
We like to stare at these things.
Pass out a couple times.
If I can add to that, thank you. I mean, there are over 500 pages, I believe, in our policy manual, and probably many more in the MASC. And so the volume of policies that need someone to go through and read them all, which I understand we have, when I think of that in the context of, say, the conversation at town meeting around, term limits, it takes a term or two just to read through the material, and if you know you're going to be leaving after that time, why would you make that investment? It's institutional knowledge builds up over time, and it takes a couple terms just to get up to speed. So I do appreciate all the work. I just don't know if people realize how much volume, how much work there is in there. So I appreciate
And the
that.
statutory responsibility on school committees in Massachusetts. Like, there's a real, I mean, I don't mean to echo the MASC training too much, but I think it's, we are in a somewhat unique position, as we, I think, had abundant evidence tonight demonstrating that to be the case, right? We have a tremendous amount of statutory authority over budgeting, the land that we own, making sure that laws are followed to accommodate students. There's a lot of responsibility on the committee, and so.
Budgeting,
Say that again.
budget development.
Budget that
Holy
was the
smokes.
finance and budget yeah,
Oh,
so
yeah.
It could be boring for some people, but I just want to give voice to the fact that there are great people who maybe have an affinity for details, who are doing great work to
Get excited
make
about
sure
this.
that we are, and I'll take responsibility for being one of those people, but.
That's true. So, yes, Mr.
I'm
Nixon.
going to throw you a curveball.
Okay.
So as you know, I have 3 kids. My youngest is now a high school freshman. She's an athlete, and I just went through our registration process for winter sport. It's a different portal than the one I used a few years ago. There are many instances in the district in which students or parents are asked to sign off on something. A district form, you can't get to here until you jump through all these hoops, and the word policy appears. I had some observations I want to share with the committee, and it's a request to our policy subcommittee and our superintendent of schools. There are numerous examples of expressions of policy that we are demanding parents and students literally sign on that they agree and accept, that are different, substantially different, and in conflict, in fact, with the policies that are in the school committee policy manual. So I'm just going to read you one example. This is the school committee's policy on hazing, which you can find in the Winchester High School Student Handbook for this school year. It references Chapter 269 of the General Laws. School committee prohibits any acts of hazing in connection with initiation into any student organization, whether such acts are committed on school grounds or elsewhere. Upon receipt of a hazing report, the following process will be carried out. It outlines the process. There's a requirement here that those who are aware need to inform the appropriate parties. The policy that parents and kids are signing off on says among other things, you'll be fined up to $3,000 or imprisonment in a house of correction. There's some line in here that says students will be potentially held liable to town employees, district employees, spectators, et cetera. I mean, there's just a lot of language in here. And I'm not sure it's quite appropriate for the kids in the district. And I think I did go back to the Mass General laws, and I think this is taken like verbatim from the Mass General laws. And I presume that we kind of outsource some of this, Mr. Marin, through, I mean, there is actually a company portal that, that hosts registration, and they probably do so for a lot of other districts, so there may be some boilerplate here. And a lot of it, like around concussion, is very similar to our policies, but this is the kind of, just because there's so much language, I think this would be really helpful, and I have a copy of our executed agreement that I can now send to you and Dr. Hackett and the policy subcommittee. I think we should maybe take a look at this, because I think there's some things that are in conflict or that we would not expect of our students. There may be some additional language that we actually want to be in here when you register for athletics.
So it's the registration form sign-off, or like student conduct.
There's lots of sort of steps in the process when you register to be an eligible athlete, and when you're finished, you actually get a copy of the registration summary, which I didn't know in advance because I was taking pictures along the way because I was finding language that I thought was interesting. But you actually get a hard copy of it. It's 12 pages long, like 9-point font, so there's a lot of text here.
Well, it's not 500.
What's that?
It's not 500 pages.
That's right.
Okay, send it over.
That's right. And honestly, there's some stuff in here that looks very much tied into our policies. And it might just be the nature of the beast where we update a policy manual, but we don't think to go back to how that earlier policy was like exported to some other sort of engagement, right, with students and families. So if I can, I'll share this with you and just ask you guys to take a look at it and be sure it comports with our policies. That's all.
That's very helpful. We, Aaron did a ton of work, as you all know, making sure the handbooks were aligned with the policy book and vice versa. So that's an important next step.
I mean, I didn't even think to look here, but honestly, you can't really look here until you jump through quite a few hoops because you're actually registering an eligible athlete, and then you find yourself presented with this. But I'll forward it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just for the record, the concussion policy that you might have mentioned was actually updated by MASC, and it's being looked at by our nurse leader and with other relevant people within the district, such as the athletic director, et cetera. So.
Have we
Any
Have
further?
we completed our official first readings? Have we done everything to comply
That's what I'm
with
wondering. Because then we'll just bring it back. So the next steps for this would be to bring it back
Yeah.
at a future meeting. So if you have any further questions about this, then please feel free to reach out to Dr. Matthews or me or Dr. Hackett. So, and we will be happy to try to figure that out.
This is the second or third tranche we've done of this, because it's a lot of work, so.
The one thought is that these were I think these were some of the easier ones that we could bring forward because they either had smaller updates, such as deleting a point here or a bullet point here or there, or it was just an outright deletion just of a policy in our manual to bring it into alignment with MASC. So I might say you could consider these some of the low-hanging fruit. But there are many more.
Buckle up.
And we
Yeah.
should also be excited that we got this far.
Yes, that's right. We're just going to keep,
Thrilled.
Making good progress.
yes. We're going to keep biting off little bits at a time. Excuse me. So, somehow I closed up one of my documents. Okay, so,
Anticipated future agenda items.
hooray. We are at the anticipated future agenda items, of which We'll continue to talk about FY26 budget development, the Lynch Elementary Replacement Project. We will be talking about the Morocco Statement of Interest process overview, strategic planning follow-up workshop, which I think I was talking about this with Dr. Hackett, and I think we're probably looking towards January or into just at the beginning of 2025 to talk about, to continue with the second half of this workshop. School improvement plans, a facilities master plan update, school committee meeting dates for January through June 2025, and English language arts presentation, which we expect to come before us at the December 12th meeting.
Which age? Or is
Middle
it
school.
the entire, okay,
Middle
middle school, thank you.
I have an item that
Yes.
I'd like to see on the list,
Sure.
which we have discussed. We should initiate a conversation around district programming that may, with two elements to this. Is there district programming we aspire to take on, whether it's next year or in the next 2 or 3 years, which would affect enrollment? That's number one. And secondly, what about space? So and both of these questions obviously can have significant impact on the master plan, but they would affect budget development and all sorts of things. So the classic example we've kicked around this table before is preschool. So we've added a room at Lynch for our integrated preschool. Every year we have a wait list for preschool. This committee and prior committees have talked about the notion of, well, what if we didn't want a wait list? Is there appetite and interest in this community for an expanded preschool? It's fair to say we couldn't do it with the model that we have, so that would have to change. If administration and the school committee want to pursue expanding preschool, that is a big deal, because that actually increases our district enrollment, number one. Number two, if you're like me and you presume that any kid who goes to the Winchester Public Schools preschool is not going to go to a private kindergarten to then come back into public first grade, then the consequence is you would actually see a change in the survival ratio for kindergarten. The idea being a preschooler who's here and in the pipeline, we hope that they're happy, they're likely going to show up in kindergarten. And that's a kid who might not have shown up because they might have been at a private preschool, private kindergarten. So obviously it's a budget question, it's funded a little bit differently, but this would have a big impact on the outcome of the master plan. We were talking about this a little bit earlier today in a working group. It's hard to imagine too many sort of program options that would have a big impact on enrollment, but that certainly would be one. Dr. Hackett, you have mentioned a couple of others that, involve other districts, but those are important conversations for us to start having. And then the second piece of that is, what about conversations that might drive changes in programming that needs space that we don't already have? Whether that's expanded world language and we don't have the square footage, or something else. We should be talking about that.
Okay.
Yeah. And that can include, by the way, conversations around specialized learning centers. We have 4. We have 5 elementary schools. Is there interest in a 5th at Lincoln, whether it's a new specialized learning center or it's a second site for an SLC program we already have? These are conversations we should start having.
Okay, thank you. Are there other agenda items? Okay. Future meeting dates. I can happily say we do not have a November 21st pre-town meeting.
Appreciate that.
Yes, very exciting. December 5th, we will have a virtual meeting, and I believe the time frame that we had settled upon was starting at 11:30 a.m. And then December 12th, we will have a regular meeting back here in LG1 at the high school. And with that,
Could I actually
Yes.
make a recommendation or suggestion? With the addition of the December 5th Zoom meeting, I think we could wait for the executive sessions to do them then. they could be at the front end of the meeting. Or you can do them tonight.
I'm fine with putting it off if you,
I'm not sure I heard the question.
you were suggesting moving the executive session to December.
Tonight's executive
From-
session be shifted to one of the December meetings.
Yeah, to the
December
beginning
5.
of December 5th.
I was just texted that my dinner's in the microwave, so I'm totally flexible. Whatever you
So-
want to do.
So if it matters, if there's, so you, December 5th is the choice. So I have a partial conflict for that virtual meeting on December 5th, so it depends on when we
We can,
situate
we
the
can figure out the
executive session.
agenda
Okay.
accordingly. Yep.
I am thinking that it might be good to just power through and get this executive session out or moving along, so that we can keep December 5th moving along efficiently, since it is a Zoom meeting.
One consideration is Ms. Bergstrom isn't here. I don't know if
Right.
that weighs in.
We still have a quorum,
That's all
Yeah,
right.
I'm happy to go executive.
We can do
Okay,
it.
it's up to you.
and I do not think that it would be that long, so. But the executive session being Purpose 2, to discuss strategy with respect to negotiations with non-union personnel, and Purpose 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, as the chair declares in both instances that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the committee. And we would adjourn from executive session.
What,
Yes,
did you just read both purposes or one?
I read both purposes.
Purpose
Okay,
2 and
sorry.
Purpose 3. I am happy, if it's helpful, Madam Chair, to make a motion to move to executive session for Purpose 2 and Purpose 3 as read into the record by the chair.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. And thank you to WinCam.
Thank you, WinCam. Thank you, audience, participants.
Way to stick it out.
Yeah.
Nice work.